You think your grandparents packed simple lunches because they lacked imagination? Think again. Those midday meals were masterpieces of survival, stretching pennies into nourishment that powered workers, students, and families through impossible times. Let's dig into 100 cheap lunches our grandparents ate to survive. Hoppin' John is a dish that has some pretty rich heritage. I'm talking about African, Caribbean, and Native American roots that all boil together in the melting pot known as the South, where it first started becoming really trendy. However, the origins of the dish are actually a bit darker than just a happy coincidence that somehow got into everyone's table. Though the people who were eating it happily wouldn't know, it was first created and brought over by enslaved Africans in the American South. It made use of African rice and pork, and yes, the best part of the dish were the black-eyed peas even in those times. Now, as far as the name Hoppin' John is considered, nobody really ever knew where it first came from, or if there was a John who made this dish and brought it into everyone's lives. But the first time this name was mentioned was in the 1840s in a print. If you were down in the South and African American communities during New Year, then you would especially see a lot of Hoppin' Johns everywhere. The aroma of those peas and the smoked pork wouldn't miss anyone's nose, as the scent carried for miles and miles away. It was eaten specifically on New Year's because it was a common belief that eating Hoppin' Johns would bring good luck to people if they ate it to start the year. If you went into any new year with such a good plate of food, I'd say your luck was already pretty good. So maybe it does work? Moving on to something sweet for a second, rice pudding with raisins. It was a Depression-era answer to a comforting dessert made from almost nothing. Leftover rice, milk or water, some sugar, and a handful of raisins were all it took to make your kids happy with a sweet treat. The magic happened when the rice simmered down into a creamy, pudding-like consistency, turning something so plain into a dessert that felt a little indulgent. Raisins were the main show here. They added the perfect amount of taste and texture, making it taste fancy rather than ordinary. Just the thought of raisins makes me want to retch. I truly admire the strength our ancestors had when they were able to eat food like this. Don't get me wrong, I love rice pudding, but raisins? No way, not a chance. The best part about rice pudding is how flexible the recipe could be. If you were like me and didn't like raisins, you could just sprinkle some cinnamon on top, or maybe even a splash of vanilla if you were feeling fancy. For families looking to make a warm, sweet, and filling dessert, rice pudding with raisins was the perfect way to go. It satisfied almost every sweet tooth without costing much, making it a household favorite. Plus, it was really simple to make, so even the kids could help and stir the pot. Some of those kids are now our grandparents teaching us those same recipes. How beautiful is that? Creamed corn is prepared by cooking sweet corn kernels until tender and then mixing them with a creamy sauce made from milk, butter, and a thickener such as flour or cornstarch. Seasoned lightly, usually with salt and pepper, and sometimes enhanced with sugar to bring out the natural sweetness of the corn, creamed corn is a favorite in school cafeterias for its smooth, slightly sweet flavor profile that appeals to young eaters. This dish serves as an excellent way to incorporate vegetables into students' diets in a form that is generally more palatable to children who may be picky eaters. Its popularity in schools is reinforced by its nutritional content, offering a good source of fiber and vitamins while being gentle on young stomachs. Creamed corn's ability to be kept warm in serving trays without losing texture or flavor makes it particularly suited to the cafeteria setting, where dishes need to remain appealing throughout the serving period. Olive loaf sandwiches merge the meaty taste of bologna with the tangy zing of green olives, creating a distinctive and palatable sandwich choice. Originating from the mid-20th century American lunch scene, olive loaf, a cold cut laden with green olives, ground pork, and beef, became a popular choice for its flavor and convenience. The sandwich itself typically includes slices of this unique loaf paired with creamy mayonnaise or tangy mustard, crisp lettuce, and occasionally a slice of cheese, all sandwiched between two slices of fresh bread. Simple to assemble and delicious to eat, this sandwich became a favorite for picnics and packed lunches, often accompanied by potato chips or pickles. Olive loaf sandwiches showcase how processed meats and cold cuts played a pivotal role in American lunch culture, offering quick, flavorful, and varied meal options for families on the go. Another name in the list that you probably wouldn't guess is the round steak and ravioli. You might wonder what a round steak is? Well, it's the meat of the rear leg. It's usually a drier cut and braised, but serving with ravioli was a popular choice. Ravioli has been popular as far back as the 20th century, but mix these two together, and the result isn't the food coma you might have expected. The dry meat tends to work much better within stews and roasts, and while it remained an incredibly popular lunch due to being easy on the wallet, it faded away as cuts with more marbling became the public preference. This dish was a regular in households around the 19th–20th century, but its glory days are a little past it. Still, it's a cut of meat that won't fail you. And who's ever said no to a little bite-sized pasta? Cowboy stew is a robust concoction traditionally associated with the outdoor cooking of American cattle herders. This dish typically includes a base of ground beef or other meat, combined with a hearty blend of potatoes, onions, beans, corn, and tomatoes, stewed in a richly seasoned broth. The stew's origins are rooted in the practical needs of cowboys during cattle drives across the American West, requiring meals that could be cooked in a single pot over an open fire. Cowboy stew's durability and popularity among outdoor workers underscore its role in the folklore of the American frontier. The recipe's evolution over time incorporated local and available ingredients, showcasing the stew's flexibility and the improvisational skills of those who made it. We're going to go forward in time a bit, all the way to the beginning of what most people consider the late 20th century, where stuffed zucchini boats first started becoming something you would hear about regularly. At bars, from your friends and colleagues, or your partners. They became really hot in the 60s and 70s when it felt like everyday people were trying another dish from a new country that hadn't really touched base in America yet. It was the first time people expanded their taste buds beyond the bacon, pancake, and hash brown breakfasts they were mostly used to. Plus, stuffed zucchini boats were really healthy. They were a lot better to eat than those aforementioned breakfasts. The best part was that you could really change up the fillings, so depending on what you wanted, you could have fully vegetarian zucchini boats or ones with ground beef stuffings. People say this is a part of Italian-American cooking, but a lot of Mediterranean cooking makes use of dishes similar to zucchini boats, like using stuffed peppers and vegetables like eggplants. Depression-era mac and cheese was a budget-friendly comfort food that made you feel like you were living large on a dime. While today's mac and cheese might be full of fancy and expensive cheeses, back in the day, it was all about making the most out of basic ingredients. A boxed pasta, some milk, and only if you were lucky, some cheese. But you better pull that smile off your face. It wasn't the gooey, cheesy kind that we know of today. It was more of a humble, lightly cheesy dish that could fill you up, don't get me wrong. The trick was stretching those precious bits of cheese as far as humanly possible. People would thin it out with milk or even water. And if money was really, really tight, they would use flour to make a roux, a mixture of flour and fat that was used to thicken sauces. It definitely wasn't gourmet, but it was cheap, and the most important of all, it was food. Even with such limited sources, this dish managed to be a crowd pleaser, especially with kids, who were just excited to be eating pasta. Depression-era mac and cheese was a smart way to turn a few simple ingredients into a meal that seemed indulgent, even if it was light years away from today's extravaganza. But you have to admit, sometimes you don't want that fully spiced up mac and cheese. Sometimes you crave a simple canned version that won't make you regret eating it later. And that's exactly what Depression-era mac and cheese achieved. Tater tots were born out of innovation in 1953 by the founders of Ore-Ida, Golden, and Francis Neefy-Grigg. Utilizing leftover potato scraps from their French fry production, they created a new snack by chopping these remnants finely, mixing them with flour and seasonings, and forming them into small cylinders before deep frying them to a golden crisp. This process not only provided an efficient solution to food waste, but also produced a snack that was perfectly crispy on the outside while remaining fluffy inside. Tater tots are particularly popular as a side dish, but can also feature in recipes like casseroles, making them a versatile component of school lunches. The method of preparing tater tots involves deep frying, which, while requiring careful temperature control to achieve the perfect crunch without burning, fits well within the capabilities of large kitchen operations in schools. Ravioli sandwiches are an unconventional, playful lunch option that taps into the beloved flavors of Italian cuisine while embracing the convenience of a sandwich. These emerged likely in response to the popularity of canned ravioli introduced by Chef Boyardee in the 1930s. The sandwich involves placing canned ravioli, filled with meat or cheese, between slices of bread, which can be toasted or grilled to meld the flavors and add a textural contrast to the soft ravioli filling. Known in some places as Italian sloppy joes or ravioli hero, these sandwiches gained a following among budget-conscious college students and anyone appreciating the melding of comforting Italian flavors with the easy handheld format of a sandwich. Popularized in the 1960s, the Watergate salad used one of the most popular ingredients at the flavored Jell-O mixes. This dessert-like lunch started becoming a family favorite. This was because of the addition of a very peculiar ingredient, pistachio pudding mix. Indeed, its sweetness arose from the nutty goodness of pistachios having the added toppings of marshmallows, different canned fruits, and extreme dollops of whipped cream. The people adopted this creamy dessert salad as a staple dessert at every family event, spreading its delight to every family member. As the awareness against consuming high contents of sugar arose, this sweet dish met its decline. With more women entering the working force, meal planning shifted to adopting healthier options and simpler desserts that didn't include a mesh of multiple high-sugar content ingredients. Thank God for our hearts. Popularized in American households in the early 1900s, So Tender Swiss steak involves a method of preparing a tougher cut of beef, such as round steak, by pounding or rolling before cooking. This tenderizing process, known as Swissing, lends the dish its name, although it has no connection to Switzerland. Traditionally, the steak is browned, then slow-cooked in a rich tomato and onion gravy, allowing the flavors to meld and the meat to become fork tender. This dish showcased an economical approach to cooking during the Great Depression, providing a delicious solution for less desirable cuts of meat. The preparation of Swiss steak often became a Sunday dinner ritual, where its slow cooking could proceed alongside family activities, making it an integral part of the family dining experience. Crackers, sure, they're pretty good even as a typical easygoing breakfast, but what do we really do here? You eat something enough times, you tend to get used to it and get bored. How do you get around that? Well, since the topic is retro dishes, we used to hear a lot about bacon bow tie crackers back in the day. It was something you could find for breakfast or a cocktail appetizer, which is some serious versatility. The crackers were extra crispy since they were wrapped inside bacon and then baked until the bacon itself was pretty crispy. It was the perfect combo, and all they needed was each other to realize that. It was smoky but sweet. It was also savory, but buttery smooth and not dry at all. Dishes that are such neat little combinations like these are often hiding right under your nose, and if we didn't have the imagination of so many home chefs who found these and got them into the public sphere, then we'd be a lot more tasteless as a country. Spaghetti with garlic and olive oil was a Depression-era meal that proved you could make something delicious from only 3 ingredients: spaghetti, garlic, and olive oil. You could whip up a dish that felt fancy without emptying your wallet. This was the kind of meal that made you look like you knew what you were doing in the kitchen, even when you were just throwing stuff together. Boil the spaghetti, then toss it in a pan with sizzling garlic and olive oil, and in a matter of seconds, your home smelled like an Italian restaurant. Sure, you didn't have any meat or sauce, but who needs them when you have garlic to do all the heavy lifting? Olive oil gave the pasta a nice, silky coat, while the garlic brought the savory punch that made you forget how simple the dish actually was. If you had the means, you would sprinkle some Parmesan or red pepper flakes on top, but even without these extras, the pasta hit the spot. This dish was a Depression-era go-to because it was cheap, easy, and quick to make. And sometimes, less is more. Rice pudding is a classic dessert that finds its way into school menus, beloved for its simplicity and comforting qualities. Made by slowly simmering rice in milk until the grains are tender, this pudding is sweetened with sugar and typically flavored with vanilla, cinnamon, or even a bit of citrus zest to elevate the dish's aroma and taste. The slow cooking process allows the rice to absorb the flavors and the milk to thicken into a rich, creamy texture. Rice pudding can be served either warm or chilled, making it a versatile option for different seasons and preferences. Its gentle, creamy texture and the mild, sweet flavor profile make it an excellent choice for a school dessert, offering a source of carbohydrate and calcium. Spam and pineapple sandwiches capture a uniquely American taste for sweet and savory combinations that soared in popularity during World War II. Introduced to the American military in 1937, Spam became a staple in many households. The recipe for Spam and pineapple sandwiches represents the culinary influence of Hawaii on the mainland, which intensified after Hawaii became a state in 1959. The sandwich features crispy slices of fried Spam paired with sweet, slightly charred pineapple rings, nestled between slices of toasted bread. This blend of salty meat with the caramelized sweetness of pineapple provides a delightful contrast in flavors. Optionally dressed with mayonnaise or a slice of cheese, these sandwiches reflect a significant Hawaiian influence on mainland American cuisine, particularly during the 1950s when Hawaiian culture gained widespread appeal. The result is a dish that marries diverse culinary traditions in a uniquely satisfying way. Bacon cheddar potato skins epitomize the fusion of simple ingredients into a beloved American bar snack. This dish, which emerged prominently in the culinary scene during the 1970s, utilizes russet potatoes known for their thick skin and starchy content, making them ideal for baking and frying. The preparation involves halving the potatoes and scooping out most of the flesh, leaving about a quarter inch attached to the skin. The hollowed-out skins are then baked or deep-fried until crisp and golden. Once crisped, these skins are stuffed with generous amounts of sharp cheddar cheese and crisp, crumbled bacon. The cheddar is chosen for its melting properties and strong flavor, which pairs well with the smoky bacon. The filled skins are then returned to the oven until the cheese melts into a bubbly, golden pool. The dish's widespread popularity helped elevate the status of the potato from a simple side dish to a featured player in the culinary world. While not mainstream like many lunches on this list, frog legs were still considered a delicacy and were relatively well known around the world. Most famous in French cuisine, followed by Chinese, Vietnamese, and Spanish cuisines. Frog legs are the meatiest part of the frog that is skinned and soaked in cold water before it is cooked. They are extremely rich in protein, vitamin A, and omega-3. They can absorb the flavors of any spice rub and prove to be a very hearty dish, consumed widely by people with eccentric tastes. With time, increasing concerns regarding the ethics behind consuming frog legs grew. It was reported that there is a decline in the species of the frogs that were usually consumed for cooking. Even though they have not completely faded away, the popularity behind this dish now arises from the shadows. Green tomato pie is something that'll have you running back for seconds. First off, you gotta hand it to whoever made this dish for their ingenuity. It's not every day you get a banger of a dish that actually is centered around making the green tomato shine out of everything else. But Southern home cooking will do that for you. Charlotte's green tomato pie in particular makes use of some typical Southern spices like cinnamon and nutmeg and unripened green tomatoes, and has you making a pie that'll rival even the best apple ones you could find at bakeries. Green tomatoes have an especially great harvest during the fall, so that's when this dish would see the most mileage. You would find houses all over the South constantly making green tomato pies, and this specific pie is an example of how you don't need anything fancy to create something that can get everyone at the table. You know what's even funnier? This dish is one of the best things to come out of mock cooking because it was made to imitate mock apple pie and mincemeat pies. An imitation of an imitation ends up giving us something that was a big part of Southern culture. Who would have thought? Fried corn fritters were a Depression-era favorite because they made something out of almost nothing. Cornmeal was cheap, filling, and very versatile, so in times when money was tight, corn fritters were everyone's go-to. All you needed was a little cornmeal, flour, water, or milk, and an egg if you could afford one. Mix it all up, fry it in some oil, and lunch is served. These fritters were the perfect way to turn pastry staples into something delicious. They were crispy on the outside, soft on the inside, and packed with flavor. And because cornmeal was so affordable, you could whip up a batch without thinking about how much money it cost. You could even throw in whatever you had in the house to stretch it even more and add nutritional value. Any leftover veggies or cheese added more flavor to the meal, making it even more comforting. Corn fritters were the kind of meal that made you feel resourceful and proved that even in hard times, you could take a handful of basic ingredients and make them into something delicious. Salisbury steak was incorporated into school menus in the 1960s, providing a hearty and appealing option. Named after Dr. James H. Salisbury, who advocated a meat-centric diet, it features ground beef mixed with eggs, breadcrumbs, and spices, shaped into patties and simmered in gravy. This method of preparation allows for bulk cooking, ideal for school settings where efficiency and volume are necessary. Salisbury steak offers significant nutritional value with its high protein content, making it a satisfying meal that supports the physical needs of growing students. The gravy not only adds flavor, but also keeps the patties moist and appealing throughout the serving period. Its rich flavor and tender texture have made it a favorite among students, ensuring it remains a popular choice in school cafeterias. Fish stick sandwiches rose to fame in the 1950s, a golden era for convenience foods, when Gorton's of Gloucester in Massachusetts introduced these breaded delights. They were one of the first frozen foods to be promoted during the television advertising boom of the 1950s, which greatly influenced American eating habits. Quick to prepare and mild in flavor, they became a go-to protein source that fit perfectly between slices of bread with a dollop of tartar sauce or ketchup. To make them, you just need to bake or fry the fish sticks until they're crispy, then sandwich them with your choice of condiments. Their popularity reflects a broader post-war shift towards processed foods that offered ease and quick preparation for growing families and bustling households. These sandwiches were particularly favored in school cafeterias, providing a speedy and efficient way to nourish children with a comforting, crunchy meal. If the Crown Roast of Frankfurters isn't a treat for your mouth, it'll be an experience for your eyes. A heavy hitter from the 50s for multiple reasons, this literal crown-looking roast of Frankfurters is one of the more unique dishes out there. It was even a popular element of diet culture in the 70s, but what's it all about? 15-20 Frankfurters standing attentively in the shape of a crown, radiant and soft, creamed cabbage or cauliflower, balls of potatoes, pimento, a dash of cider vinegar, and a lot of sewing and trial and error. The biggest factor that makes or breaks the dish is how well you can tie and keep the Frankfurters together. It's the essence of the dish and what gives it both its flavor and recipe. Still though, an edible crown? That's a pretty good flex for your Saturday cookout. But the amount of Frankfurters without any additional condiment makes for a pretty bland lunch. Introduced during the late 1980s as American interest in Asian cuisine surged, pineapple ginger chicken stir-fry represents a fusion that captures the essence of both American and Asian tastes. This dish combines juicy, sautéed chicken pieces with sharp ginger and sweet pineapple, delivering a dish that bursts with contrasting flavors. The addition of bell peppers and onions adds a crunchy texture, enhancing the overall sensory experience. The use of ginger, not only for its flavor but also for its reputed health benefits, coincided with a growing American fascination with healthier eating options. It exemplifies how global ingredients were becoming more accessible in local supermarkets, enabling home cooks to explore international recipes with ease. Speedies are also something you would find at gatherings for family or just friends, mostly because no party is complete without a good platter of meat skewers going around a few drinks. So, mostly people would enjoy these most when the meat was lamb, but some areas like California would use chicken or beef too. It was really the grilling where the magic happened. These plates of Speedies set the mood in a party alight. It was a taste that, when they experienced it, people at a party knew that they were in for a really good time. The kind of dish that gets a crowd excited and hungry. There were even Speedafests in Binghamton and all around New York in general. It was a part of the local culture that no big celebration was really complete without. The reason it got popular Wasn't just because of a regional preference in New York, though. The dish was bold, tangy, and citrusy, and it could double as an amazing sandwich too. You would find these in street stalls throughout New York, as well as at homes, but nowadays the dish has faded away into irrelevance. Name you might not hear very often in the cooking world, as far as French cuisine is concerned at least, is Marie-Antoine Carême, but you can thank her for some amazing dishes such as the vol au vent. This is actually something that got so popularized in American cookbooks in the mid-20th century. In the 1970s, when a national interest in foreign cooking really started popping off in America, there were a lot of trends centered around haute cuisine, and especially things you would find in premium French restaurants. In French-American communities, a vol au vent was a typical Saturday lunch that you would find being served up by your grandmother. Marie-Antoine Carême is a legendary French chef, and a reason she got that acclaim was because she managed to make up dishes that would suit the average household. Vol au vent is actually not really something you'd find at a five-star restaurant or on the upper end of what your wallet could afford. Most people would treat this like a party meal, something to serve at cocktail parties or New Year's ones. It was just puff pastry filled in with chicken, mushrooms, and creamy sauces, but it blended all of those together to make a really warm and earthy taste, which makes it perfectly suited to something you'd associate with your grandma's table. Baked potato bar was the Great Depression gem that turned a humble spud into a customizable feast. As we've learned so far, potatoes were one of the cheapest groceries back in the day, so they were widely available. This made them the perfect base for a meal. You'd bake a bunch of potatoes until they were soft and fluffy, then set up a bar of sorts with whatever toppings you could scrape together. Butter, leftover veggies, a sprinkle of cheese, or even some canned beans all work to turn that plain potato into something exciting. This do-it-yourself approach lets everyone in the family get creative with their toppings, making mealtime fun, even with limited options. The best part is that potatoes play as a blank canvas in this recipe. You could add whatever you thought fit the best. So even if you ate them every day, you wouldn't get tired of them and they'd still be interesting. A baked potato bar was the ultimate budget-friendly meal that let you feel like you were in control of the lunch. Well, as much as you could be during the Great Depression. Boiled hot dogs have been a long-standing favorite in American school cafeterias, known for their simple, tasty, and quick preparation. Made from a blend of beef and pork, these hot dogs are seasoned and boiled, served in a soft bun with a variety of condiments like ketchup, mustard, and relish. This cooking method is particularly effective in school environments as it allows for hot dogs to be prepared en masse and kept warm. The simplicity of boiled hot dogs makes them a reliable choice for school cafeterias, where the lunch period is often brief and the demand for quick service is high. Additionally, the familiarity and ease of customization of hot dogs meet diverse student preferences, making them a popular and comforting choice. This meal option not only satisfies hunger swiftly, but also aligns with the logistical needs of serving hundreds of students. Peanut butter and pickle sandwiches present a surprising mix of flavors that demonstrates the adventurous side of American sandwich making. Originating in the mid-20th century, this combination pairs the creamy, slightly sweet taste of peanut butter with the sharp, crunchy tang of pickles. Often referred to as the Southern Comfort Sandwich in the southern United States, it features a liberal spread of peanut butter on bread with layers of thinly sliced pickles. This sandwich can be enjoyed open-faced or as a standard sandwich, and it pairs wonderfully with a cold glass of milk. The resulting meal is a bold blend of sweet, salty, and tangy flavors, offering a taste experience that's both unexpected and satisfying. Almond in the haystack is a lunch that sounds just as confusing as its recipe. A few generous ounces of cream cheese, half a cup or less of salad dressing, a generous dazzle of chopped almonds, pickles, and onions, because we can't live without our pickles, right? Shaped into meal, appetizer, sized mounds. Either way, these almonds in a haystack look big enough to not eat alone. And the secondary star of the show, ham. This mid-20th century was a questionable one then, and it's an eyebrow raiser now. Popular mostly in the early 50s to 60s, it was in cookbook recipes everywhere, but now you'd find out about reading articles like this one. That's a long way from fame, huh? Can't blame the people either. The dish is a savory roller coaster, and it's not exactly an easy one to swallow, sensation or taste-wise, so the glory days being half a century ago makes sense. The taco salad, which emerged as a popular dish in American cuisine in the 1960s, is a notable example of Tex-Mex culinary fusion. The typical taco salad starts with a crunchy tortilla bowl filled with lettuce, seasoned ground beef, shredded cheese, diced tomatoes, and black olives, finished with dollops of sour cream and salsa. This dish illustrates the adaptability of Mexican cuisine to American tastes, incorporating more cheese and sour cream than traditional Mexican salads. Taco salads became particularly popular in the 1980s, often served at gatherings and potlucks due to their customizable nature, which allowed guests to tailor the toppings to their preferences. Taco salad's popularity also coincided with a growing interest in more casual dining experiences at home, where families and friends could interact in more relaxed settings. I don't need to tell you about how much America and the West in general love rice pudding. It's been something that's helped rural and urban populations get through some disastrously tough times, as well as a warm memory from childhood for a lot of people. One variation of the classic rice pudding was a Swedish rice ring, which would mostly be served at Christmas or a family get-together, but it eventually extended into daily use too. The dish first started off as something you'd only find in Scandinavian communities, and they'd really make heaps of the stuff. Enough to go around a big family of 6 or 8 with a bowl for each, and it makes sense too since it was made using some pretty average ingredients. Stuff like rice, milk, and cream were all you needed to get a Swedish rice ring going. The way it differed from normal rice pudding is in how the dish was originally always made with some kind of spice and topped with fruit or served alongside jam. Later on, when it expanded past the Scandinavian locale and got adopted into widespread use, people started using nutmeg and cinnamon as well. Some scant cookbooks might still recall the dish and the times where it was a great comfort meal, but a lot of the new ones don't really remember it anymore. Rustic vegetable soup was the ultimate clean-out-the-fridge meal. It was simple and delicious, and as an added bonus, you didn't need a plan. Grab whatever vegetables you had lying around: carrots, potatoes, celery, basically anything that hasn't gone to mush. One of the great things about this soup is that it is no fuss from beginning to end. Our ancestors from the Great Depression era weren't aiming for fancy restaurant vibes, but rather just some homey, wholesome-feeling goodness. You didn't really have a specific recipe, but more of a suggestion on how the preparation went. You could add beans, pasta, or that half-used zucchini you've been side-eyeing in the pantry. The base was solid broth, maybe a couple of herbs and some salt. Even if you weren't the most talented chef, this wasn't a problem. All you needed to do to make this lunch was to chop up some veggies, toss them in a pot, and let them simmer. Voila! All of a sudden, you've made a meal that could feed a family for days. Your kitchen will smell like you've been working on that lunch for hours, but instead, it was the stove that has been doing all the heavy lifting. Rustic vegetable soup was cheap, healthy, and a great way to use up all odds and ends before they got bad. So next time your veggie drawer is looking tragic, remember, rustic vegetable soup is here to save your grocery budget. Fried chicken patties were introduced to American schools in the 1980s and quickly became a favorite due to their similarity to popular fast food. These patties are made from ground chicken mixed with spices, then breaded with flour and breadcrumbs to create a crispy outer layer. The frying process transforms these prepared patties into golden, crunchy delights with a juicy interior, typically served as sandwiches or with sides like fries. The method of preparing these patties is well suited to the high-volume requirements of school cafeterias, involving simple steps that can be executed quickly: mixing, forming, breading, and frying. This efficiency ensures that delicious hot meals can be served promptly, reducing wait times and maximizing student satisfaction during lunch breaks. Turkey and cranberry sandwiches cleverly repurpose the quintessential Thanksgiving leftovers into an enticing sandwich that marries the savory flavor of turkey with the sweet tang of cranberry sauce. This tasty combination rose to popularity in mid-20th century America, showcasing an inventive way to transform holiday leftovers into delightful new meals. The sandwich is simply made by stacking slices of turkey and cranberry sauce, often accompanied by stuffing between two pieces of bread. This culinary creation not only makes excellent use of leftover turkey, but also captures the festive essence of Thanksgiving, melding juicy, savory turkey slices with the sharp sweetness of cranberry sauce in a sandwich that embodies the holiday's spirit. Extremely popular, especially from the 1940s to the 1970s, Jell-O salads started appearing at parties and family gatherings. This was an American salad made from flavored gelatin, now called Jell-O, fruits and shredded vegetables like carrot and cabbages. We know. What an abomination to use Jell-O for savory dishes. Toppings like cottage cheese, cream cheese, or pretzels were added onto these salads to enhance its presentation. They were famous in the suburbs as it was seen as a mark of sophistication of a housewife, showing casing elegance through salads having shapes of Jell-O made with customary molds. Definitely a shocking way to compete with others. As French cooking was introduced in the United States, Jell-O salads were thankfully seen as less elegant and lost their charm. Soon, dietary trends against consuming Jell-O caused the final decline of this once fashionable food. Cabbage rolls trace their roots to Eastern European cuisines, brought to the United States by immigrant communities. This dish involves steamed cabbage leaves wrapped around a filling of mixed ground meats, rice, and herbs, then baked in a tomato-based sauce. Each component, from the soft cabbage exterior to the rich, flavorful filling, plays a pivotal role in crafting a dish that is both filling and balanced. Introduced to American tables by the early 20th century, cabbage rolls became a meaningful dish among families, often prepared for large gatherings and special events due to their somewhat labor-intensive preparation. The recipe's ability to be made in large batches and stored for later use made it practical for both festive occasions and efficient home cooking, bridging the gap between tradition and convenience in the American culinary repertoire. You hear the name rumaki and you might start thinking about some pretty exotic dishes, but it's actually more of a humble appetizer that picks a few flavors and does them really well. It was also made at Trader Vic's, a Polynesian-style restaurant right here in Uncle Sam's USA, which I'm sure you didn't see coming either. I wouldn't blame you for thinking it's exotic, since at tiki parties it was definitely considered that, and when tiki culture as a whole started erupting into the mainstream of American eating, it was still sought after, with just as much interest. The dish itself also makes use of some things that aren't familiar, and some that are, like chicken livers, water chestnuts, and bacon. It was a really good hors d'oeuvre that boomed in popularity after the World War II era, though you'd be pretty stumped if you tried to go out and look for it today. Still, it's kind of sad we can't go out to parties and experience chestnuts and crispy bacon anymore, wouldn't you agree? Or is tiki cooking not really up your alley? Green tomato pie is something that'll have you running back for seconds. First off, you gotta hand it to whoever made this dish for their ingenuity. It's not every day you get a banger of a dish that actually is centered around making the green tomato shine out of everything else. But Southern home cooking will do that for you. Charlotte's green tomato pie in particular makes use of some typical Southern spices like cinnamon and nutmeg and unripened green tomatoes, and has you making a pie that'll rival even the best apple ones you could find at bakeries. Green tomatoes have an especially great harvest during the fall, so that's when this dish would see the most mileage. You would find houses all over the South constantly making green tomato pies, and this specific pie is an example of how you don't need anything fancy to create something that can get everyone at the table. You know what's even funnier? This dish is one of the best things to come out of mock cooking because it was made to imitate mock apple pie and mincemeat pies. An imitation of an imitation ends up giving us something that was a big part of Southern culture. Who would have thought? The savory grilled cheese sandwich was the Depression-era comfort food that made even the simplest meal feel indulgent and like you were having a feast. With just bread and cheese, you could create a warm, melty sandwich that instantly lifted your spirits and comforted you during the hard times. The bread was cheap, and cheese was a luxury, but a little bit went a long way when you fried it up between two slices of bread. The secret to a perfect grilled cheese was in the toasting. You'd butter the bread or use whatever fat you had. Lard worked too, and fry it in a hot pan until golden brown and crispy. The cheese would melt inside, creating a gooey center that made this sandwich popular to this day, even though the ingredients were simple. If you were lucky, you could add extras like tomatoes or onions, but even on its own, a grilled cheese sandwich was a crowd pleaser. This meal was quick, easy, and, most importantly, cheap. It was perfect for lunch or dinner, and you didn't need much to make it satisfying. In tough times, a grilled cheese sandwich was a little slice of comfort, proving that even the most basic ingredients could come together to create something delicious. Fish sticks became part of the school lunch menu shortly after their commercial introduction in the 1950s. Made from white fish like cod or pollock, these sticks are cut into manageable pieces, breaded and then deep-fried or baked to create a crispy exterior with a tender and flaky interior. This preparation method not only makes fish sticks easy to eat, but also appealing to the palates of young students, who may otherwise be reluctant to consume fish. The breading, often seasoned with spices and herbs, adds a savory flavor that complements the mild taste of the fish, making it a popular choice in school cafeterias. Fish sticks are typically served with tartar sauce or ketchup and a side of vegetables, providing a balanced meal with proteins, carbs, and vitamins. Their ease of preparation, including the ability to cook them from frozen, aligns well with the needs of large-scale meal production typical in schools. Peanut butter and bacon sandwiches represent a bold fusion of flavors, combining the smooth, slightly sweet taste of peanut butter with the crispy, savory bite of bacon. This combination was part of a broader mid-century trend of experimenting with sweet and savory pairings, which included other famous concoctions like chicken and waffles. Popular in mid-20th century America, this sandwich typically involves a generous spread of peanut butter on toasted bread, topped with strips of crunchy bacon. The king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, was known to enjoy this sandwich with added slices of banana, introducing a sweet layer to the salty-sweet mix. This quirky combination was emblematic of a period when Americans were open to experimenting with diverse and unexpected flavor pairings, creating memorable and satisfying meals. This rather confusing mix of a pea salad with bacon and cheese left us scratching our heads when we came across it. Back in the day, salad was a go-to starter for many households, just like it is today. The inclusion of cheese in a peas cream salad, however, is far from normal. The use of canned peas and pre-shredded cheese made this salad quick and easy to assemble. While some might say that this simple salad that can be made using peas, cheese, cream, and bacon may taste good, it is definitely not something on the menus in the 21st century. Even households who love to make salads would not think of this disastrous mix of ingredients. Alas, in the 1950s and 60s, this simple 4-ingredient salad was cheap and something new. It became a head-turner for a while until it eventually died down and people went back to the plain old simple pea salads. Crab Louis salad, reputed to have originated on the West Coast in the early 1900s, is a luxurious ensemble of crab meat, hard-boiled eggs, tomatoes, asparagus, and iceberg lettuce, dressed in a creamy sauce made from mayonnaise and chili sauce. This salad is often linked with the dining rooms of San Francisco and Seattle, where it was served as a gourmet item in the early 20th century. The inclusion of Dungeness crab, a regional specialty, underscores the salad's connection to the Pacific Northwest's seafood bounty. Its enduring popularity was fueled by the dish's association with elegance and affluence, making it a prized feature on hotel and restaurant menus. Additionally, Crab Louis salad is a testament to the American culinary tradition of adopting and adapting regional ingredients to create dishes that become part of the national gastronomy. You hear the name rumaki and you might start thinking about some pretty exotic dishes, but it's actually more of a humble appetizer that picks a few flavors and does them really well. It was also made at Trader Vic's, a Polynesian-style restaurant right here in Uncle Sam's USA, which I'm sure you didn't see coming either. I wouldn't blame you for thinking it's exotic, since at tiki parties it was definitely considered that, and when tiki culture as a whole started erupting into the mainstream of American eating, it was still sought after, with just as much interest. The dish itself also makes use of some things that aren't familiar, and some that are, like chicken livers, water chestnuts, and bacon. It was a really good hors d'oeuvre that boomed in popularity after the World War II era, though you'd be pretty stumped if you tried to go out and look for it today. Still, it's kind of sad we can't go out to parties and experience chestnuts and crispy bacon anymore, wouldn't you agree? Or is tiki cooking not really up your alley? You hear the name rumaki and you might start thinking about some pretty exotic dishes, but it's actually more of a humble appetizer that picks a few flavors and does them really, really well. It was also made at Trader Vic's, a Polynesian-style restaurant right here in Uncle Sam's USA, which I'm sure you didn't see coming either. I wouldn't blame you for thinking it's exotic, since at tiki parties it was definitely considered that, and when tiki culture as a whole started erupting into the mainstream of American eating, it was still sought after, with just as much interest. The dish itself also makes use of some things that aren't familiar, and some that are, like chicken livers, water chestnuts, and bacon. It was a really good hors d'oeuvre that boomed in popularity after the World War II era, though you'd be pretty stumped if you tried to go out and look for it today. Still, it's kind of sad we can't go out to parties and experience chestnuts and crispy bacon anymore, wouldn't you agree? Or is tiki cooking not really up your alley? Tomato soup with rice was a Depression-era lunch that combined simplicity with a great deal of comfort. You didn't need much in order to make it. Just a can of tomatoes, or even water and tomato paste, a handful of rice, and any seasoning you like. This was the perfect meal for a cold, rainy day when you needed something warm and filling that could stretch your ingredients and make them last a week. Rice was the main deal here. It could bulk up the soup, turning a thin tomato broth into a hearty meal. With rice, you can always assume that a little goes a long way, and it turned what could have been a sad bowl of red water into a meal that actually felt like food. Plus, rice was very cheap, so adding that to your meals meant you made sure that a small pot of soup could feed the whole family. And while it wasn't really gourmet, you could get your creative freak on and make it special. A few tricks included adding a pinch of sugar to cut the acidity, and a pinch of garlic powder to make it zesty. Tomato soup with rice was the kind of meal that will get you through hard times, without making you feel like you were missing out on some great delicacy. It was simple, satisfying, and budget-friendly. Let's roll back to the meals that made every lunch penny well spent. Here we go. Pizza first appeared in American school cafeterias in the late 1950s, tailor-made to appeal to children with rich, savory toppings such as pepperoni and sausage. Originally from Italy, this beloved dish was transformed in the U.S. with hearty, high-fat ingredients, providing a quick and satisfying student meal. Assembled with hand-stretched dough, slathered with tomato sauce, and layered with mozzarella and meats, the pizza is baked at high temperatures. This process melds the flavors and textures into a delicious offering with a crispy crust and a melted cheese topping. The combination of carbohydrates, protein, and fats met the nutritional needs of busy school environments efficiently, making pizza a consistent hit among students who relished the comforting taste and filling nature of each slice. The fried bologna and cheese sandwich is a classic testament to the straightforward, comforting nature of traditional American cuisine. In the southern United States, this sandwich is sometimes affectionately called a redneck steak, highlighting its role as a staple among working-class families. This unpretentious sandwich comprises slices of bologna, fried until the edges curl, paired with melting cheese and enclosed between two slices of bread, then grilled or toasted. Its roots can be traced back to the early 20th century when bologna was a popular and economical meat choice, quickly becoming a favored lunch option in the Midwest and southern U.S. Typically found in diners and local eateries, this sandwich won over many with its uncomplicated yet satisfying blend of crispy, savory bologna and creamy, melted cheese, encapsulated in warm, toasty bread, a simple yet fulfilling dish loved for its comforting flavors. On to the Frank bean bake. This interesting combination of ingredients arose when canned beans became the first form of convenient food and started to emerge in the United States. It was a budget-friendly dish combining hot dogs and beans, commonly found in American households. The popularity of this dish peaked during the Great Depression when affordable and filling meals were necessary for many families. It was often served in casual settings, a dish that was a snack between friends hanging out or siblings having a brief lunch break. Often it was served on days people gathered to watch sports. The basic recipe included slices of hot dog served on top of baked beans, which doesn't sound appealing, but the flavor seemed to be great. Additions to make it more fancy would be brown sugar, herbs and spices and onions. A ham and cheese quiche, which gained prominence in American kitchens in the 1970s, is a refined yet simple dish, originating from French cuisine but fully embraced by American bakers. This savory pie combines a flaky pastry crust with a luscious filling of eggs, cream, diced ham, and shredded cheese, often Swiss or cheddar for extra flavor. The quiche is baked until the egg mixture sets into a creamy custard, perfect for slicing. It became popular not just for its delicious taste, but for its adaptability to various dining occasions, from brunches to dinner parties. The dish's versatility extends to the kitchen, where variations might include different types of meat, vegetables, or cheeses, depending on the cook's preference or the ingredients on hand. Moreover, the preparation of quiche contributed to its status as a dish that could be dressed up for guests or scaled down for a simple family meal. I know for a fact you've all grown up on some of your grandparents' baked ziti, especially if you have some Italian roots, and if you do, then you share that in common with this dish. Right from the streets of Italy, immigrants first brought this dish over in the middle of the 19th century throughout the early start of the 20th one, so it had a lot of time to become something that people could love and associate with the finer things in life. People had a lot of time by the mid-20th century to try this dish, and plenty of families had passed their own secret baked ziti recipes down. The baked ziti really hit its highest highs during that time period in the 1950s to the 1970s, and it was something you could enjoy at both a potluck and a fancy at-home date. It was a staple of Italian-American cooking, and you could even find it at weddings. I, for one, think that really speaks to how popular the dish was, but what's your experience with this dish? And if you don't have any yet, is it something you'd ever try out? Savory bread pudding with leftover veggies was the ultimate Depression-era hack for turning scraps into a hearty meal. Got stale bread? Perfect. Leftover veggies that are past their prime? Even better. This dish was all about not wasting a thing. People couldn't afford to throw food away during the Great Depression, but instead, they got creative. And this meal was one of those everything but the kitchen sink meals that you might have heard your grandma or great-grandma talking about. To make it, you had to tear up the stale bread, mix it with eggs and milk and whatever leftover vegetables you had lying around. It could be basically anything. Carrots, peas, whatever didn't make the cut for last night's dinner. Season it with salt and pepper and maybe some herb seasoning and bake until it is golden and crispy on top, but soft and warm inside. The best part about savory bread pudding was that it made something delicious out of things you would usually throw away. And the Great Depression didn't look kindly upon those who didn't know how to save up. Stale bread was transformed from slices into a cozy meal that tasted like it took more effort than it actually did. This dish proved that even in hard times, you could make a meal out of practically nothing. Macaroni and cheese loaf emerged as a popular variation in the 1970s when schools sought to diversify their menu offerings while still providing comforting and familiar foods. This dish takes the beloved elements of traditional macaroni and cheese, a mixture of cooked macaroni and creamy cheese sauce, and adds eggs and breadcrumbs to bind the ingredients into a solid loaf that can be easily sliced. The loaf is baked until the exterior is slightly crispy and golden, offering a textural contrast to the soft, cheesy interior. This format not only makes serving more efficient, but also reduces food waste, as the loaf can be cut into precise portions. Experience the culinary crossover of egg foo young sandwiches, where American and Chinese traditions meet in a mid-20th century flavor explosion. This unique sandwich format includes an egg foo young patty, made with beaten eggs mixed with vegetables and often additional proteins like meat or seafood, nestled on bread or a bun, sometimes smothered with a rich, savory sauce. Prepared by frying the patty until golden and serving it on toasted bread, this sandwich offered a flavorful, fulfilling meal. With fillings typically including bean sprouts, mushrooms, and onions, and options for shrimp or pork, it provided a satisfying blend of textures and tastes becoming a favored lunch or dinner choice served with a side salad or light soup. Curried fish in rice ring is a more of an exotic lunch dish. It first came to light in Danish cuisine. Much like its name, this dish includes a ring of flavored rice, and the center is kept hollow for the main star of the dish, fish. The rice is covered with a fish curry sauce that was cooked in herbs and spices, creating a sauce having overly large pieces of fish. The rice ring was typically made with saffron or turmeric to give it a vibrant color. This dish is so visually appealing that if you serve it at a dinner party, they'd definitely take a bite. But the taste? Well, that just depended on how many people like an overly seafood-concentrated dish. It may not be the worst, but it's definitely not the best. The odd mix of vegetables with huge pieces of fish in some rice doesn't exactly sound as appealing as it looks. Zucchini panzanella salad, an adaptation of the classic Italian bread salad, began to capture the attention of American food enthusiasts in the late 1990s. This version introduces zucchini and robust Italian bread, grilled to perfection, tossed with ripe tomatoes, red onions, and fresh basil, all dressed in a balsamic vinaigrette. The innovation lies not just in the ingredients, but in the method of preparation that emphasizes the grilling of vegetables and bread to enhance their flavors before combining them with the dressing. This approach not only maximizes the textures and flavors, but also aligns with a growing preference for grilled foods. The salad's popularity grew as it became synonymous with summer dining, often featured in outdoor meals and barbecues where a light yet satisfying dish was required. Are you a big fan of deli food? Deli meats, sandwiches, loaves, that kind of thing? Then one of the best parts of that kind of eating was the olive loaf. It was usually made with pork and beef plus chopped green olives, which is what it became known for. There was a small, brief period before convenience foods started taking over America, where processed meats were really becoming a thing, and this dish was a big part of that time, which arguably spanned all over the 1940s to the 1970s. It had an extremely loyal fan base too, as this was responsible for many deli counters still staying in business. These days, you could find retro stalls that still do a mean olive load, but the days where this was a commonplace item on the street and something you'd see your grandma cooking up are long gone in America's history. People definitely remember the flavors of the bologna, the ham loaves, and all the amazing dips they came with, though. Potato bisque was a Depression-era dish that made something rich, special, and comforting out of the simplest ingredients. Sweet potatoes were cheap, filling, and packed with nutrients, making them a staple. To make this bisque, you'd boil the sweet potatoes, mash them up, and blend them with water or milk to create a smooth, creamy soup. Add a bit of salt, pepper, and maybe a sprinkle of cinnamon, and you had yourself a bowl of warmth and comfort. What made sweet potato bisque so great was how satisfying it was for so little cost. The natural sweetness of the potatoes gave it a rich flavor without the need for expensive ingredients, and its creamy texture made it feel indulgent. Whether eaten on its own or with a slice of bread, this bisque was the perfect way to fill up during tough times. It was a simple, hearty dish that provided warmth, nutrition, and comfort. It is popular to this day and considered somewhat of a luxury. It is widely used in high-end restaurants, whether it is served as a side dish or as a full-course meal. And by that I mean, it is served on those big plates with just a sprinkle of food in the middle, which costs more than my shoes. But never mind that. It was and is, to this day, a fall staple. Potato patties are a creative and delicious way to utilize leftover ingredients, transforming simple mashed potatoes into something special. Mixed with eggs and a little flour to help bind them, seasoned with salt, pepper, and often additional flavors like finely chopped onions or herbs, these patties are then shaped into rounds. The next step involves pan-frying them in a little oil until each side turns golden brown and crispy, creating a delightful contrast to the soft interior. Each batch can be made efficiently, serving many students without requiring extensive cooking time. They can be featured as a vegetarian entree or a side dish, complemented by various dips and sauces that enhance their flavor. This versatility makes them an invaluable addition to the school menu. Curried sardine salad sandwiches blend the robust, pungent flavors of sardines with the exotic, spicy warmth of curry powder, producing a sandwich that's anything but ordinary. These culinary delights originated in mid-20th century America, when canned sardines were an economical choice in the pantry, especially in the aftermath of World War II. This particular recipe mixes mashed sardines with curry powder, creamy mayonnaise, a splash of lemon juice, and crisp chopped celery, creating a spread that's rich in both flavor and texture. Spread generously on bread, this salad can be adorned with fresh lettuce or cucumber slices, adding a crunch that contrasts beautifully with the creamy filling. In England, it's common to find variations including chopped apples or raisins, adding a sweet note, while American adaptations might toss in hard-boiled eggs or capers, enhancing the flavor profile further. Perhaps one of the most unhinged recipes we've come across. Ham-wrapped bananas from the 70s are an unexpected combination of flavors. This recipe is as baffling as its name sounds. Baked bananas covered in mustard and wrapped in ham and cheese truly sounds just as bad as it was. Combining cheap items like ham and bananas was the easiest way for people to ensure they get their protein and fruit intake completed in one lunch. Ham-wrapped bananas, now faded into history, in the 70s were considered to be a heart meal. Mothers would give them as lunches to their children. This recipe could be found in McCall's Great American Recipe book that normalized putting fruit and meat cuts in one meal. Today, this meal is remembered as one of the oddest combinations ever created, one that would be repulsive to eat. Lunchables were launched in 1988 by Oscar Mayer, a brand owned by Kraft Foods, aimed at simplifying school lunch preparation for busy parents while appealing to children with fun, customizable options. Originally conceived during a company brainstorming session, the idea was to create a product that could use the brand's existing meat products in a novel way. The initial Lunchables kit featured crackers, processed cheese, and sliced meats, and could be assembled into miniature sandwiches, mimicking the action of building with blocks, which resonated well with children. Over the years, Lunchables expanded to include various themes like pizzas and tacos. The marketing campaigns for Lunchables focused heavily on fun and convenience, successfully capturing the interest of both parents and children. The packaging also evolved from simple plastic trays to more vibrant and engaging designs that featured games and trivia, enhancing the appeal. These kits not only changed the way food is packaged, but also influenced children's lunch habits by providing a fun and interactive way to enjoy their midday meal. Speaking of those times, another really good source of protein was catfish, and one of the best ways to have it was fried catfish with hush puppies. This is again something that'll take us right to the heart of Southern cooking if we eat it. Along those rural places near rivers, lakes, ponds, and other bodies of water where you could find fresh catfish in abundance. Hush puppies were something made with fried cornmeal batter and were a popular dish to give to soldiers during the Civil War, so all in all, this dish was really light money-wise. Some basic Cajun spices or a Southern spice blend would make it even better into a real full-fledged meal that you could eat in comfort with the family. While it's been a big part of Southern cooking ever since the 19th century, it arguably had its biggest glory days in the 20th one as part of Southern soul food. There was a time in the 30s to 40s where soul food started to get into more and more menus across several places in the South, which wasn't always the case. Thank God it did, though, because steamed catfish definitely doesn't hit the spot quite like fried ones do with some golden brown hush puppies. Onion and potato frittata was an everyday favorite because they turned simple ingredients into a meal that felt special. Potatoes were cheap and filling, and onions added the extra flavor. The beauty of frittata was in its simplicity. You'd slice up some potatoes and onions, fry them until golden, and then pour beaten eggs over the top. Cook it until the eggs are set, and just like that, you had a hearty, savory dish that worked for any meal. It was one of those dishes that could stretch to feed a crowd. Plus, if you had a little cheese lying around, you were going to become a favorite lunch host. It was an easy way to make a meal feel complete without having to use any expensive ingredients. This frittata was super versatile as well. You could throw in whatever veggies or leftovers you had on hand. Whether eaten for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, onion and potato frittata was a reliable go-to that made the most out of limited supplies and left you feeling full and satisfied. It proved that a little creativity could vastly change the food game in the house. Buttered corn is a straightforward yet beloved side dish in school cafeterias, consisting mainly of corn kernels that are gently steamed to maintain their crispness and natural sweetness, then tossed with a moderate amount of butter and a pinch of salt to enhance the flavor. Buttered corn's appeal in educational settings lies in its simplicity and the universal appeal of its sweet and buttery flavor, which makes it a hit among students of all ages. It serves not only as a tasty addition to various main dishes, but also as a way to provide a vegetable option that is both nutritious and enjoyable. The inclusion of corn as a regular item on school menus ensures that students receive a good source of vitamins, minerals, and fiber, contributing to a balanced diet. The ease of preparation and the ability to keep the dish warm without compromising its quality make buttered corn a practical choice for school meals. Cheese soufflé, a sophisticated culinary delight, found prominence in 1970s dining rooms. Originating in France, the soufflé's name derives from the French verb souffler, meaning to puff. The first recorded recipe for soufflé appeared in Vincent Lachapelle's 1738 culinary book. A cheese soufflé is made with a base of bechamel sauce, into which grated cheese, traditionally Gruyère or Comté, is folded. Egg yolks are then incorporated, followed by stiffly beaten egg whites, which provide the soufflé its characteristic airy texture. The mixture is poured into a buttered and breadcrumb-dusted soufflé dish and baked until it puffs up and turns golden brown. The delicate balance of flavors and textures, combined with its dramatic rise, makes cheese soufflé a culinary masterpiece that showcases the chef's skill and precision. All right, the jellied tomato refresher is a summer exclusive and definitely a good way to cool down, and it involves a lot of tastes you might not be familiar with. Now I know what you're thinking. This is a glorified Bloody Mary, and the answer may surprise you. It almost is, but not totally. Unflavored gelatin, tomato juice, green pepper flakes, sweetener. Good, tried and tested, reliable Worcestershire sauce. It involves mixing everything with the tomato juice to create a tasty broth and then adding in soft gelatin, letting it set in the fridge, and then beating it a little before serving. It was extremely popular in the late 1960s-80s, but it seems it didn't keep up with modern taste buds at all. You couldn't convince someone at gunpoint to make this one with a straight face. Cornbread-topped frijoles blends the heartiness of traditional Mexican beans with the comfort of Southern American cornbread, creating a casserole that is both nourishing and satisfying. This dish layers seasoned beans, often pintos or black beans, cooked with peppers, onions, and spices, topped with a layer of cornbread batter that bakes into a crusty topping. Originating from a blend of Native American and Mexican cooking techniques, the dish was adapted over time to include a variety of beans and sometimes meat, making each rendition a local specialty. The dish not only satisfies with its rich flavors and textures, but also serves as a practical one-dish meal that could easily feed a family or a gathering. Cornbread-topped frijoles became favored for its economical use of basic pantry staples and its ability to be prepared ahead of time, making it ideal for communal meals and family dinners. Here's something that started out in the bleakest of times but quickly became a sensation throughout America even after the Great Depression ended. You can't ever beat a fried bologna sandwich. I don't care what uptown neighborhood and what fancy restaurant you've been to. Something about that mix of bologna with cheese, mayo, and sometimes even bacon and sausages is unbeatable. It was something that was incredibly beloved by the public right after the Second World War ended, and the Midwest in particular couldn't really ever get enough of it. Diners, homes, rural areas, local breakfast joints, everyone was serving an affordable fried bologna sandwich. It was something you could rely on to both satisfy your taste buds, get you a healthy dose of protein, and not break your wallet if you had it daily, which was really asking for a lot in those times. Carrot and potato hash was a Depression-era staple that made the most out of two cheap and hearty veggies. Potatoes were filling while carrots added just enough sweetness to keep things interesting. This meal was perfect for stretching a limited budget because both ingredients were as cheap as they come, lasted forever, and could be found in almost every kitchen. The preparation was simple. Chop up the vegetables, toss them in a hot pan, and fry until golden and crispy. It was simple, but the combination of soft potatoes and slightly caramelized carrots created a comforting, flavorful dish. If you had an onion lying around, it could join the party, adding even more depth to this humble hash. The beauty of carrot and potato hash is in its versatility. You could eat it on its own or throw an egg on top for some protein. Either way, it was filling, warm, and super satisfying. Everything you needed to keep going during tough times. It wasn't the most exciting dish, but it got the job done. And isn't that what really counts? Sloppy Joes have been a staple in American school cafeterias since their introduction in the mid-20th century. This dish features ground beef or pork that is sautéed with onions and garlic until browned, then simmered in a savory tomato-based sauce seasoned with Worcestershire sauce and other spices. The thick, hearty mixture is then spooned onto soft hamburger buns, creating a filling and flavorful sandwich that is both messy and delightful to eat. The preparation requires minimal kitchen equipment and ingredients that are staples in most school pantries, making it a cost-effective choice for feeding a large number of students. Moreover, the ability to prepare the meat mixture ahead of time and quickly assemble the sandwiches during busy lunch periods enhances its practicality. The familiarity of the flavors, combined with the satisfying nature of the sandwich, ensures that Sloppy Joes remain a cherished option within school meal programs. Starting with a masterpiece of lunchtime tradition, the tuna melt on rye holds a storied spot in American cuisine. This beloved sandwich stacks a hearty tuna salad, crafted from a blend of canned tuna, creamy mayonnaise, and a select mix of seasonings, beneath a slice of melting cheese, all nestled between two slices of rye bread and grilled to crispy, golden perfection. Its origins trace back to the 1950s in Charleston, South Carolina, where it was born from a happy accident involving a chef and a mishap with tuna salad landing on a grilling cheese sandwich. This serendipitous event led to the tuna melt's rapid rise to fame, making it a favorite across diners and cafes throughout the nation. The construction is simple. Tuna salad and cheese are layered on rye bread, which is then grilled until the bread crisps beautifully and the cheese turns deliciously gooey, a testament to how the best culinary creations can stem from the most unexpected incidents. Introduced in the 1970s, the hamburger helper became a staple for many American families as a quick and easy meal solution, hence it being called America's favorite one-pan meal. The most popular version of it included the basic ingredients of dried pasta with a package of seasoning in a box to be cooked along with some ground beef. The product was first introduced by the General Mills subsidiary, Betty Crocker, as a response to the rising meat prices at the time. Cleverly, it included the word helper, as the manufacturer's main goal was to advertise it as a way to make your hamburgers taste better. It certainly helped the pockets of families as it became an affordable option for meat and pasta lovers. Due to increasing competition and evolving taste buds of the masses, this beloved lunch slowly faded into the background, lost amidst the multiple relaunches and newer creations. Combining two iconic American fast foods, the cheeseburger and French fries, into one dish, the cheeseburger French fry casserole emerged as a popular meal option in the late 1980s. This casserole layers seasoned ground beef mixed with ketchup, mustard, and chopped onions, topped with a layer of French fries, sprinkled with shredded cheese, and baked until golden and bubbly. Introduced in the kitchens of inventive home cooks during the 1990s, this casserole was a response to a growing interest in recreating fast food favorites at home, offering a fun and fuss-free dinner option that delighted both kids and adults alike. Brown Betties were one of the most classic American desserts to ever grace the table of an American kid. Something that might be seen as an old-fashioned dessert now, but used to be the next best thing after an apple pie. The flavors of a Brown Betty usually come from the spiced apples and other fruit-layered dishes, which are really buttery. The sugary breadcrumbs on top give it a crunch, which really adds to the entire vibe of the Brown Betty. You're looking for a warm, comforting dish that gets you in a nostalgic mood. Something you can sit down with and enjoy bite for bite, not rush through. It's an experience that you want to savor, like an empty, windy street as you walk down by and enjoy it. The Brown Betty was definitely something that would get you up out into the street, whether you were going to visit your grandma's for an authentic pie or a nearby bakery to reminisce about childhood days. The earliest recipes you can find are the ones from 1866, but those are more like Apple Betties than the ones we're talking about. Either way, this dish has definitely evolved alongside the population, and those who grew up with it will remember it fondly. Deviled eggs with pickles were a treat that turned humble ingredients into something delicious back in the day. Eggs were a cheap, reliable protein source, and if you had a jar of pickles, you were already halfway to creating something fancy, by 1930s standards anyway. Making deviled eggs is nothing revolutionary. Just hard-boil them, scoop out the yolk, and mix with a little mayo, mustard, and the thing that ties it all together: pickles. The pickles added a crunch that took the eggs from plain food to a party snack. However, the only party trick was surviving yet another day on a shoestring budget. People loved deviled eggs because they felt like a special treat, even when times were tough. The pickles added that little something extra, like a surprise flavor bomb in the middle of your egg. Plus, it was a great way to stretch a meal. Eggs were filling, and they were perfect for families who had to make do with limited supplies. Whether served at lunch or as a snack, deviled eggs with pickles were a fun, zesty way to make an ordinary ingredient feel a little more special. Powdered milk in school cafeterias serves as a practical alternative to fresh milk, particularly valued for its extended shelf life and lower cost. This dehydrated dairy product is reconstituted by adding water. Powdered milk is often used not only as a beverage, but also as an ingredient in various recipes, from baked goods to mashed potatoes, enhancing their calcium and protein content. Although it may lack some of the flavor nuances of fresh milk, it remains an important nutritional component, offering essential nutrients such as vitamins D and A. The use of powdered milk in schools is driven by logistical advantages. It requires no refrigeration and can be stored for long periods, making it ideal for large-scale food service operations where efficiency and cost-effectiveness are priorities. Its inclusion in school meal programs ensures that students receive sufficient daily dairy intake, supporting their overall health and development within the constraints of school budgets. Pizza burgers burst onto the American culinary scene in the 1950s, offering a delightful mashup that appealed to anyone with a love for hamburgers and pizza. This novel creation typically consists of a hamburger patty, either grilled or fried, smothered with marinara sauce, sprinkled with mozzarella cheese, and then broiled until the cheese bubbles with joy, all served on a traditional hamburger bun. Some versions go further, adding toppings like pepperoni or green peppers to more closely mimic a pizza, or substituting the beef patty with spicy Italian sausage for an added kick. By the 1960s, pizza burgers had carved out their niche, especially in school cafeterias and fast food restaurants, offering a tasty twist on well-loved classics and capturing the era's zest for new and exciting food experiences. A rather odd variation of noodles from the 70s was the infamous Mug-O Lunch, mostly popular among school-going kids. The Mug-O Lunch provided kids with a mushy mess of mac and cheese that would have to be heated up. Advertised as a hot dish you can create in a mug, the Mug-O Lunch had multiple options apart from macaroni and cheese. This included beef noodle, chicken noodle, and spaghetti that were sold in packets of dried pasta and seasoning packets meant to be combined with boiling water and stirred in a mug. But costing only a few cents, the quality and taste of the lunch was what can only be described as a hot, mushy mess. Thankfully, with time, newer inventions of instant meals, specifically instant noodles that tasted better, came, and we were saved from this average lunch from the 70s. The introduction of Mexican lasagna in the 1980s showcased the seamless integration of Mexican flavors into traditional Italian architecture. This layered delight swaps out standard lasagna noodles for tortillas and the usual marinara for a zesty salsa, layering ground beef seasoned with taco spices, refried beans, and plenty of cheese. Each oven-baked layer melds into a textural symphony that's both familiar and novel. This dish not only catered to the growing American appetite for global flavors, but also provided a fun, festive twist on the classic lasagna, making it a favored choice at dinner parties and family nights. Its preparation, often involving family members in the assembly process, turned cooking into an interactive experience, further solidifying its popularity. We're going to take a bit of a deep dive into a cuisine that we haven't really explored before. I'm talking about caponata, which is a very traditional Sicilian dish that goes all the way back to the 18th century. It's supposed to be a sailor's dish. Can you believe that? It got that reputation attached to it because the birthplace of caponata was Sicily. There's no specific restaurant or name that's credited with making it, but if you ever went there, you'd know just how much the people appreciate this. The first time this became popular in America was when Mediterranean cuisine and Italian immigrants were mixing together and creating all sorts of new dishes, as well as bringing old familiar ones from their homeland. The best part about this dish for a lot of people was that it gave a chance to a vegetable, which otherwise people just aren't too fond of. I mean, eggplants aren't really the most main course worthy idea you could think of, right? Pair that up with some tomatoes, onions, olives, and capers and cook it in vinegar, sugar, and olive oil. Make a nice little traditional agrodolce sauce, and you'll get this extremely earthy dish with a lot of complex flavors going for it. Fried rice with vegetables was the ultimate Depression-era hack for making leftovers exciting again. Day-old rice was the perfect base because it was cheap, filling, and easy to stretch. And just like with rice pudding with raisins, rice came to steal the show. You'd take whatever vegetables were on hand, carrots, peas, onions, or anything nearing its expiration date, toss them in a hot pan with a bit of oil, and fry it all together until golden and fragrant. Nothing, and I mean nothing, goes to waste. This dish was about making the most of what you had. It didn't matter if the veggies were a little past their prime because once they hit the pan, they were given a new life. A little soy sauce or garlic added a ton of flavor, and if you were lucky enough to have an egg, you could crack one in for extra protein. The fried rice was a genius way to turn scraps into something satisfying. It was fast, flavorful, and filling, everything you needed in a meal when times were tough. Plus, it was incredibly versatile. You could throw in any leftover meat or keep it vegetarian, and it would still be a hearty dish that stretched the food budget. Peanut butter and jelly bars take the quintessential American sandwich and transform it into a dessert format that is both nostalgic and delicious. This treat is prepared by layering a base of crumbly, buttery dough in a baking dish, spreading a generous amount of peanut butter and then jelly over the base, and topping it with more of the crumbly dough. The bars are then baked until the topping is lightly browned, resulting in a dessert that is rich in flavor and has a satisfying texture contrast between the soft filling and the crunchy topping. These bars incorporate the familiar flavors of peanut butter and jelly in a form that is easy to distribute and consume, making them an excellent addition to school lunch menus. Peanut butter and jelly bars not only provide a source of energy, but also bring a sense of comfort and nostalgia to the dining hall. Tuna Jello. Salad is a striking example of mid-20th century American culinary creativity, combining seemingly incongruous ingredients like canned tuna and lime-flavored gelatin. This dish first emerged in the 1950s, a time when gelatin salads were all the rage. The process involves dissolving lime jello in hot water and mixing it with canned tuna, finely chopped celery, pimento, and hard-boiled eggs, then letting it set until firm. Served on a bed of lettuce and often garnished with dollops of mayonnaise or whipped cream, this salad blends savory and sweet in a mold that is as eye-catching as it is unique. Often featured as the centerpiece at luncheons or as a dinner entree, its unique combination of ingredients and textures made it a memorable, if somewhat unusual, dish. True American classic, the cheeseburger pie was a dish found in Kansas City where beef is highly consumed. It was part of the famous Impossible Pie series by Betty Crocker. This pie gained popularity due to its cheesy goodness and a flaky crust filled with juicy ground beef as its core ingredients. It was advertised as being a recipe in the No Time to Cook cookbook to appeal to people looking for a quick way to create a meal that would tug at your heartstrings. It could be customized by people adding different forms of sauces on top or the addition of sautéed onions and bacon. At the peak of its popularity was when people realized a cheap fix doesn't equal a healthy fix, and concerns arose around consuming such a high cholesterol meal. Slowly, this dish lost popularity, Rightfully so, as maintaining the health of your heart is more important than melted cheese. Introduced during the 1970s in the American broccoli casserole became a beloved dish that cleverly combined the need for convenience with the desire for flavorful meals. This casserole mixes chopped cooked ham and broccoli with a rich cheese sauce, often made creamier with the addition of a condensed soup, which is then topped with breadcrumbs or crushed crackers for texture and baked until golden. This dish exemplifies the era's ingenuity in using readily available, often pre-processed ingredients to create a dish that could serve as a one-pot meal, reducing both preparation time and cleanup. It became particularly favored for its versatility, allowing variations such as substituting chicken for ham or adding different vegetables, thus catering to a range of palates and pantry contents. The casserole's popularity surged as it appeared in magazine spreads and cooking shows, often recommended for its ability to double as a dish suitable for both weeknight family dinners and social gatherings. So this is a bit of a tricky name to pronounce even when you give it a genuine try, but it's worth knowing about this dish because of how good it is. Ballymaloe Irish lamb stew is something that comes all the way from County Cork, and lamb stew is something that Americans welcome with very open arms. You can particularly find this dish being spread in droves around St. Patrick's Day in any Irish-American community. Whether you're in New Hampshire or Rhode Island, which even today have a pretty solid amount of Irishmen living in them, you're bound to run into a Ballymaloe stew once in a while. Despite how good of a stew it is, with tender carrots, potatoes, and tender strips of lamb, and how simple the preparation is since it relies mostly on the natural flavors present in the ingredients, this dish actually flopped once before. Well, I wouldn't say it was a true flop, but it did fade out of the memory of the general public before too. That was before the 20th century, but ever since then it has been seeing a bit of a revival thanks to social media and Ballymaloe House, which is what it's named after. Either way, this is one of the best recipes to ever come out of a family cookbook. And if you've ever had one while at an Irish friend's home, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Bacon. My personal favorite from this list, mashed potato patties. They were a genius way to use up leftover potatoes while creating a tasty treat. Potatoes going to waste during the Great Depression? Now that's just vile. It was like the 8 deadly sins. If you had leftover mashed potatoes, you'd mix them with a little flour, maybe an egg if you had one, and season them up with salt and pepper. Form them into patties, fry them up in a pan until they are crispy, and suddenly those leftovers were a star of the meal. Their crispy outside and soft inside made them everyone's favorite, even though they were made from the simplest ingredients. You could eat them on their own if you had some gravy or maybe even some vegetables. Now that's a whole meal if you ask me. Mashed potato patties were a hit because they were so easy to make and could feed the whole family with minimal effort. Who doesn't like fried potatoes? I know a person that doesn't. My mother. Nothing fried will ever step foot in her kitchen. So there weren't any potato patties for us. Actually, that's not true. They were just oven-baked. I guess they weren't so bad. I am just bitter that they weren't fired. Fried potato patties were crunchy, satisfying, and a great way to give new life to everyone's favorite pantry staple, potatoes. Creamed spinach in school cafeterias combines nutritional value with palatable presentation, making it a favored vegetable dish among students. The preparation starts with fresh or frozen spinach, which is thoroughly washed and then cooked down until it wilts. A creamy sauce made from a blend of milk, flour, and butter is prepared separately, seasoned with a hint of nutmeg or garlic to enrich the flavor profile. The spinach is then incorporated into the sauce, which gently coats the leaves, creating a smooth and appealing texture. This dish not only adds a vibrant color to the plate, but also increases the intake of greens in students' diets, providing essential nutrients like iron, vitamin A, and calcium. The combination of creamy texture and mild flavors often helps to introduce and encourage a preference for vegetables among younger children, supporting school nutrition programs in their goal to foster healthier eating habits. Sloppy Joe casserole, a hearty American dish, was a staple in 1970s family meals. The original Sloppy Joe, a sandwich filled with ground beef in a tangy tomato sauce, is believed to have been created in the 1930s at a cafe in Sioux City, Iowa. The casserole version incorporates the same ingredients: ground beef, onions, green peppers, tomato sauce, and seasonings, spread in a baking dish and topped with biscuits or cornbread batter. It is then baked until the topping is golden and the filling is bubbly. This adaptation offered a family-friendly one-dish meal that could be prepared in advance, making it ideal for busy households. The combination of savory beef and a satisfying golden crust made it a popular choice for casual family dinners and gatherings. Enjoyed by food enthusiasts, especially those with more European tastes. The terrine of garden vegetables traditionally arose in French cuisine. It is a vegetable loaf that is cooked in a mold that sounds very bland. A vegetable terrine is made from different vegetables like leeks, zucchini, cucumbers, beets, and tomatoes. All of these ingredients would be put in the mold and gelatin would be poured on top of it. Use of meat would be optional, so meat texture alternatives like hardy mushrooms would be used. This dish is often served cold, but can also be given at room temperature, which makes it mushy. Just from the description, one would cringe thinking about the taste. Thankfully, with time and newer generations, the idea of vegetables suspended in Jell-O lost its appeal, and such Jell-O vegetable creations faded into history. Known affectionately as a hot dish in the Midwest, the tater tot casserole is a quintessential example of American comfort food. It was popularized in the 1950s as a convenient way to create a hearty meal with minimal ingredients. The casserole consists of a base layer of ground beef seasoned with onions, a binder of condensed mushroom or chicken soup, a layer of canned or frozen vegetables, and a top layer of crisp tater tots. As it bakes, the tater tots form a golden crust, providing a crunchy contrast to the creamy, savory mixture below. The casserole's popularity also demonstrates the post-war American innovation in using processed and prepackaged foods to save time in the kitchen, a trend that mirrored the nation's growing emphasis on convenience and efficiency in everyday life. I know we've had some wacky sandwiches and spread combinations in the history of the nation so far. A lot of those started off as slightly divisive, but they ended up making a place for themselves, growing out of the niches they carved into the food culture in America. Unfortunately, for fluffernutter sandwiches, it really did stay mostly as a niche, but a pretty good one. This takes your typical bread, nothing really special, and your typical peanut butter, again, nothing you haven't seen around the block 1,000 times, and adds a bit of a twist. You ever think about what peanut butter could be stacked on top of some thick marshmallow creme? Me neither, until I was searching about the history of this dish and how they were a Massachusetts classic. Known as Liberty sandwiches and made by Emma Curtis in 1918, it was described as the perfect wholesome snack to get you a sugar rush whenever you needed it. Also, it was stupidly popular with children, especially around campfires. While we're on the topic of sweets, let's talk about baked apples with cinnamon. They were the ultimate Depression-era dessert, which could turn just a few apples into something that felt warm and comforting. Apples were relatively inexpensive and easy to come by, and baking them with a sprinkle of cinnamon transformed them into a dessert that made everyone feel like they were indulging. Making baked apples was as simple as coring the apples, placing them in a dish, and stuffing the centers with a mix of cinnamon, sugar, and maybe a little butter if you had some. And into the oven they'd go. In a matter of minutes, your house smelled like a bakery from dreams. The apples would soften. Their natural sweetness was enhanced by the cinnamon, and the result was a dish that felt way more luxurious than it actually was. This was a dessert that required very few ingredients, but the payoff was huge. It was warm and delicious, and made you feel like you were eating something truly special, even in the middle of hard times. Whether served on their own or with a bit of cream if you had it, baked apples with cinnamon were a simple pleasure that lifted spirits without draining the pantry. Indulge in the European-inspired rice pudding lunch bowl, where tradition serves comfort at your American lunch. Made from a simple mix of cooked rice, milk, sugar, and a hint of vanilla, this dish is cooked slowly until it becomes thick and creamy. The rice pudding lunch bowl could be customized with various toppings, such as a dusting of cinnamon, a dollop of jam or fresh berries, providing versatility and appealing to different tastes. Once prepared, it's often garnished with a sprinkle of cinnamon, fresh fruit, or nuts, adding flavor and texture. Served either warm or cold, it was adaptable as a dessert or a light lunch, fitting seamlessly into any meal plan. Its versatility was appreciated in homes where cooks valued recipes that could be easily adjusted to suit the occasion, making rice pudding a reliable and satisfying choice. Fish in aspic had its claim to fame in the 20th century, and was usually always used together with fish in dishes like sanya kuna, a local treasure in Nepal. Though it might be a little out of your comfort zone because it's a dried fish curry that's made with old mustard, cold water, and spices. You've probably seen aspic usually in the form of broths or stocks of different meats, encased in molds combining many tasty ingredients. The use of fish and aspic together has been found as early as 1375, and even in recent history it still makes its appearance. The 19th century wasn't that long ago in retrospect. In America, it became really popular around the 1950s, but now you'd be hard-pressed to find this as a weekly staple of anyone's home-cooked dinners or lunches. Not to say it's not worth trying at least once, though. Just keep an open mind. And water. This festive dish, emerging in American culinary circles in the mid-20th century, cleverly combines the contrasting flavors of sweet pineapple and savory cheese. The pineapple cheese ball consists of cream cheese enriched with finely chopped pineapple, green peppers, and sometimes added ham or pecans, rolled into a ball and coated with crushed nuts. The dish captures the post-war American enthusiasm for novel flavor combinations and party foods that could double as conversation starters. Its popularity at social events can be attributed to both its taste and its decorative appearance, which made it a visually appealing centerpiece on buffet tables. The pineapple cheese ball also illustrates the period's innovation in using canned ingredients, which were celebrated for their convenience and year-round availability, allowing hosts to whip up impressive treats without extensive preparation. So the next two dishes we have on the list are actually some classics right out of Africa and its many varied cuisines. First off, we have chicken and collard greens pilau, which is just the perfect dish to have if you're aching for something that involves a lot of rice in it. The steamed and boiled chicken mixed with the pilau as a base for the dish gives it an aroma that's pretty much unbeatable. Back in the middle of the 20th century, if you really wanted to experiment with some foreign cooking and tastes, then you would go into African American communities and try out the best of their soul food. You'd have to look around a little for the really nice restaurants, especially if you were in places like the southern parts of America, but nonetheless, people found a way. Pilau itself is also a dish that's extremely common in the subcontinent for many reasons. People use basmati rice for this, which is a little different from the rice you guys might be used to, but if you give it a shot, you might find that it has a more full flavor all around. Also, don't even get me started on how good this is for you. If you're a gym bro looking for a great way to add some tasty protein and carbs to your diet, then chicken and collard greens with some pilau is a pretty flawless place to start. Simple egg drop soup was a staple because it took next to nothing to make, but still felt like a real meal. What you needed was some broth, homemade or from whatever scraps you could find, and a few eggs. You'd bring a broth to a simmer, whisk the eggs in a bowl, and slowly and carefully drizzle them in a hot liquid while stirring. The eggs would instantly cook, turning into soft, silky ribbons that made the soup what it is to this day. If you've got leftover veggies, be prepared to make this soup, and if you've got meat, even better. You've just made yourself a delicacy. Egg drop soup was a meal that stretched what little you had left while still managing to be comforting and filling. Even if you were running low on ingredients, egg drop soup made you feel like you were eating something homemade and special, instead of scraps you could barely gather. It could warm you up, fill you up, and the best thing of all, it took you, maybe and only maybe, about 5 minutes to make. American chop suey is a comfort food classic that has found a niche in American school cafeterias, combining practicality with palatability. This dish melds ground beef, elbow macaroni, and a tomato-based sauce seasoned with onions and bell peppers, all simmered together to allow the flavors to fully integrate. The preparation begins with sautéing onions and bell peppers until they are soft, adding the ground beef to brown, and then incorporating the cooked macaroni and tomato sauce. This mixture is seasoned with herbs such as oregano or basil, and sometimes a dash of Worcestershire sauce for deeper flavor complexity. American chop suey is particularly valued in school settings for its ability to be made in large volumes economically, using ingredients that are staples in most school kitchens. It's also well suited for holding and serving over extended periods, which is essential in a busy cafeteria environment. Take a bite into the past with bologna boats, a fun and inventive lunchtime creation from mid-20th century America. These unique creations start with slices of bologna, heated and shaped into whimsical boat-like forms, then filled with a hearty helping of creamy mashed potatoes, gooey melted cheese, or savory baked beans. School cafeterias were particularly fond of serving these as a fun, kid-friendly option. The versatility of bologna boats is notable, with some versions including macaroni and cheese or even chili for those seeking something more substantial. They emerged as a clever way to utilize common pantry staples creatively, providing a budget-friendly meal solution during times when stretching the grocery budget was necessary. The sandwich loaf was a popular party dish in mid-20th century American cuisine. This loaf included pieces of bread slices set up in a horizontal manner. The fillings could range from egg salads to ham salads and cheese. People turned towards using odd ingredients in the loaf that would make for one interesting taste. In 1912, due to the lack of variety in sandwich condiments, people in the United States came up with the idea of a cheese and salt sandwich loaf. You heard that right? They would mix cheese with an excessive amount of salt, and there you go. Lunch was served. Thankfully, this lunch faded away as time went on, saving us from a terrible sandwich that no one could fathom eating today. Corn soufflé presents a refined twist on traditional American ingredients, combining the native sweetness of corn with the airy texture of a classic French soufflé. Introduced into American kitchens primarily in the early 20th century, this dish features corn kernels blended with a mixture of milk, butter, and egg yolks, with stiffly beaten egg whites folded in to give it a light, fluffy consistency. The soufflé is then baked until it rises and turns golden, offering a delicate balance of flavor and texture. The dish highlights the versatility of corn, a staple American crop, by showcasing it in a form that contrasts dramatically with its usual preparations. This adaptation not only speaks to the culinary creativity of the time, but also to the integration of European techniques with American ingredients. Homemade vegetable pancakes were a Depression-era favorite for stretching limited ingredients. The beauty of pancakes in general is that you could throw in anything you had lying around, from vegetables and fruits to nuts and chocolate. But for veggie pancakes, people usually turn to carrots, potatoes, onion, and zucchinis. They were a great way to get something warm and filling on the table without needing a lot of ingredients. They were easy to make, cheap, and full of flavor thanks to the caramelized veggies. They could be served for breakfast, lunch, or dinner since they were so versatile. Plus, they were a sneaky way to get kids to eat their vegetables. Anything in pancake form will be eaten in a matter of seconds. These homemade vegetable pancakes were a resourceful way to show just how creative people could get in hard times. And on the upside, they were fun to make and even more fun to eat. Let's take a moment and admire the moms of the last century. They were creative, never failing in trying to make their kids healthy and happy. Always on the go, always trying to make the best possible meals for entire families. These homemade vegetable pancakes are the perfect example of that. I mean, just thinking about putting veggies in pancakes makes me want to barf. But hey, when all you had in your pantry were veggies, you had to make some use of them. Sweet steak and kidney pudding is an example of a traditional British dish that occasionally makes its way into American school cafeterias, especially in areas with British influences. The preparation involves dicing steak and kidney, mixing these with a rich, thick gravy, and encasing the mixture in a sweet pastry. This assembly is then steamed for several hours, ensuring the meat is tender and the pastry is cooked through. The result is a savory filling pudding that offers a unique dining experience, typically reserved for special events or educational days, focusing on international cuisine. This dish not only introduces students to different culinary traditions, but also provides a substantial meal. But taste the innovation in every hearty bite of Jiffy ground beef cornbread casserole, a triumph of American home cooking. Rising to popularity in the mid-20th century, This casserole marries seasoned ground beef with the simplicity of Jiffy cornbread mix, a product that became a staple in American kitchens following its introduction in the 1930s by the Chelsea Milling Company. The preparation involves browning ground beef with onions, garlic, and a medley of spices, then layering it in a baking dish, topping it with a batter made from the iconic cornbread mix. Once baked, the casserole presents a delightful contrast of flavors and textures, with golden cornbread capping a juicy, flavorful beef base. It became a favored choice for an easy and satisfying meal, perfectly blending ease of preparation with hearty flavors. The introduction of herbed rice pilaf into American dining rooms in the late 1980s can be seen as part of a broader trend towards incorporating refined grains into everyday meals. This dish, prepared by sautéing rice with onions and butter before simmering in chicken or vegetable broth, is enhanced with a selection of herbs such as parsley, thyme, and rosemary. The preparation of rice pilaf was often highlighted in culinary schools and cooking shows as a basic skill, illustrating the technique of infusing flavors into rice through the choice of broth and herbs. The dish's popularity was boosted by its versatility, serving as an elegant side that complemented a wide range of main dishes, from roasted meats to vegetarian entrees, making it a useful recipe in the repertoire of any aspiring home chef. Minestrone soup was the ultimate Depression-era kitchen sink meal. Got some leftover veggies, a can of beans, and a bit of pasta? Throw it all in a pot and call it minestrone. This soup was a go-to for families looking to stretch their ingredients as far as they could. Carrots, celery, potatoes, or whatever you had on hand, everything went into the pot with some broth or water and simmered until the flavors melded together. To this day, minestrone soup is one of my favorites, and for good reasons. It sparks up a nostalgic feeling in my bones and brings up old memories. Each fall and winter in our house, it was known that for the next few months we will be eating only cold weather food, which meant minestrone soup, cabbage, stuffed bell peppers or zucchini, pumpkin-tasting anything. You get the gist. So every year, as the leaves start changing colors, I know it's time to get the warm clothes out and prepare our bellies for 6-ish months of warm, comforting foods. It's not said in vain that it is the most beautiful time of the year. Let me get back to the soup. It was a hearty, filling soup full of nutrients, and on top of that, super adaptable. The beauty of minestrone was that no two batches were ever quite the same, but they were always delicious. This soup was great for feeding a large number of hungry mouths on a budget, and it only got better as it sat in the fridge. Corned beef and cabbage offers a cultural touchstone in school menus, particularly around St. Patrick's Day, providing a festive and educational meal. This dish involves slow-cooking corned beef in a spiced brine until it is tender, then adding chunks of cabbage that cook until just tender, absorbing the rich flavors of the meat. Corned beef and cabbage is not only a nod to cultural heritage, but also a balanced meal, offering a good mix of protein and vitamins from the cabbage. In school settings, this dish serves as a special menu item that can educate students about international cuisine while providing a nutritious and flavorful meal. Its preparation, while requiring more time than some other dishes, is relatively straightforward and can be executed with basic kitchen equipment, making it feasible for special occasions in schools. The macaroni and cheese loaf sandwich merges classic comfort food with the convenience of a sandwich, popular in mid-20th century America. This intriguing dish features slices of macaroni and cheese loaf, a processed deli item that blends pasta and ham encased in a meatloaf-like product, layered between bread with mustard or mayonnaise. First introduced in the 1950s, this loaf became a unique addition to the American sandwich repertoire, often accompanied by chips or pickles on the side. This sandwich provided a novel, tasty meal solution that appealed to those who cherished the hearty flavors of macaroni cheese, but desired the practicality of a sandwich, making it a peculiar yet beloved option for lunches. The world's one-stop shop for all things tropical brings you the Fondaloha from the shores of Hawaii. 2 sizable fresh pineapples, a cup of cooked sliced chicken or turkey, your choice, diced celery, mayo dressing, and some chopped chutney. This is one you could see yourself eating in a little quirky experimentative mood. The pineapples are sliced and cubed, with the eyes taken out and the pineapple shells. The cubed fruit is mixed with the meat and veggies, then the sauces and drained before serving. You can add bananas and peanuts in a calm little toss for flavor, but it might be overdoing it too. You could find this in its own episode of Betty Crocker recipes in the 70s, but now it's definitely gone out of style. Sounds like something you'd eat in a Disney movie, chilling at a resort. As Mediterranean diets gained popularity in the United States for their health benefits, the layered Mediterranean dip emerged as a favored choice for its delectable mix of flavors and healthful attributes. Widely introduced in the 1990s, this dish layers hummus, tzatziki, olives, diced tomatoes, cucumbers, and feta cheese, each layer offering a unique texture and flavor. Though traditionally served with pita chips as an appetizer, this dish also serves beautifully as a substantial lunch option, especially when paired with a fresh salad or grilled vegetables. Its popularity highlights a growing American trend towards dishes that are not only nutritious, but also substantial enough to serve as a main course at casual lunches or gatherings. Chickpea salad was the Depression-era version of a light, protein-packed lunch that didn't break the bank. Chickpeas were cheap and easy to store, and when mixed with a few pantry staples, they became the star of a surprisingly tasty salad. All you needed were some canned or cooked chickpeas, a bit of oil, vinegar, and whatever veggies or herbs you had on hand. If you had onions, celery, or even a tomato, chop them up and toss them in. This meal felt refreshing, yet filling. The chickpeas provided protein and fiber, while the vinegar and oil dressing brought everything together with a bit of zest. Chickpea salad could be served as a side dish, or just slap it between some bread and call it a sandwich. It was perfect for when you needed a quick, no-cooking meal. It was budget-friendly and packed with nutrients. It's no surprise that people still enjoy chickpeas to this day and make an effort to incorporate them to their daily nutrition. It was and still is one of those dishes that made you feel like you were eating healthy, even though your pantry was running low on options. Cup steak puddings has a huge part in the historical British comfort food list. It is a warm meal that would make any person feel happy and content after consuming. It is a meaty delight that includes the use of fine British beef pieces in the form of steak as well as using kidney parts. It is slow cooked and added to a gravy having the flavor of your liking. Most commonly, it is cooked in the Guinness gravy. This steak and kidney gravy is combined with a sweat, beef fat-based pastry and boiled together, creating the perfect cup steak pudding. As good as we made it sound, the taste would be rather precarious, hence why its popularity died down over the years, making this dish a forgotten and rather confusing lunch. Lentil soup's place in the American culinary landscape was solidified as nutritional awareness rose in the 1980s. This humble soup, made from lentils simmered with carrots, celery, onions, and a medley of spices, became prized not only for its comforting warmth, but also for its nutritional powerhouse status, offering high protein and fiber content. The simplicity of its ingredients and the one-pot cooking method appealed to those seeking wholesome, minimal-effort meals. Additionally, lentil soup's adaptability to incorporate various spices and additional vegetables allowed it to remain a favorite among those experimenting with global cuisines, easily taking on flavors from different culinary traditions. Fried green tomatoes. No, I am not talking about the 1991 movie by the same name. They were a Depression-era favorite that took something as simple as unripe tomatoes and transformed them into a crispy, delicious dish. Tomatoes that weren't ripe yet were a common sight, and instead of letting them go to waste, people fried them up. For the preparation, you had to slice the tomatoes, coat them in cornmeal or flour, and fry until golden brown and crispy. They were a perfect combination of tangy and crunchy. The slight bitterness of the green tomatoes was balanced with the crunchy cornmeal, which made them surprisingly addicting. Again, they were a good way to get your kids to eat some veggies and fuel their bodies with healthy nutrients. As an added bonus, they were extremely cheap to make, using the ingredients everybody had on hand. Fried green tomatoes were a great way to add variety to meals during the Depression. I think this dish takes the cake as the most unbelievable, because it's one thing to eat and use up old veggies that are near their expiration date. But to eat unripe fruits and vegetables, that's a whole other story. But this meal should serve as an example of how far people would go to survive in the hard times. Cold fried apple hand pies were the portable sweetness that turned hard work into something worth savoring. Made from dried apples rehydrated with sugar, cinnamon, and a pinch of nutmeg, the filling was tucked inside thin circles of dough and fried until crisp. Once cooled, they were wrapped in brown paper, stacked neatly in tins, and packed for the next morning's work. By lunchtime, the pastry had softened around the filling, turning chewy and tender without losing its golden flavor. Each bite carried the taste of fall, the comfort of orchards, the scent of dried fruit, and the memory of wood smoke. Families made dozens during apple season, drying fruit on screens so none went to waste through winter. School children unwrapped them eagerly at recess, while farmers or miners found them waiting after hours of labor. Sweet but sturdy, they offered both joy and endurance. No frosting, no fuss, just the kind of dessert that worked as hard as the hands that made it. In every pie was gratitude, proof that simple fruit, a little sugar, and time could make something lasting. Cabbage and noodles offered a humble yet satisfying lunch inspired by the Eastern European traditions many Midwestern families brought to the United States. Thin egg noodles were tossed with butter and braised cabbage until everything glistened with savory richness. A dash of black pepper and a sprinkle of salt were all it needed to shine, though some schools added onions for extra flavor. The aroma of slow-cooked cabbage filled the air, signaling a meal that was both thrifty and hearty. Students enjoyed the tender noodles and the slight sweetness of the softened cabbage, a combination that surprised even those who claimed to dislike vegetables. It was a warming dish perfect for chilly afternoons, proving that simple ingredients could create deep comfort. Lunch ladies served generous scoops that stuck to the ribs and fueled long hours of classwork and play. Cabbage and noodles may sound plain today, but in those lunchrooms, it was beloved, a quiet reminder of home-cooked heritage and shared traditions. Cottage cheese and canned peach plates were the no-cook lunch that showed up every time the stove was off limits or the heat outside was too much to bear. You scooped a mound of cottage cheese onto your plate, opened a can of peach halves, arranged them neatly, and called it lunch. Maybe you added a lettuce leaf underneath to make it look fancy, but nobody was fooling themselves. It was all about speed and simplicity. Diet cookbooks from the 1970s praised this plate as a light, protein-packed option that took barely 5 minutes to make. It was weirdly filling, cold, and refreshing, especially when summer kitchens felt like ovens. You could spot this combo everywhere, from lunch counters to school cafeterias, with old diner menus proudly listing it as the fruit and cottage cheese plate. It might not sound like much today, but back then, this quick plate was a lifesaver when groceries were tight and cooking felt like a chore. Cornmeal mush squares were proof that mountain folks could turn the simplest ingredients into comfort. Cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt were cooked into a thick porridge at night, poured into a pan, and left to cool until firm. By morning, it's sliced clean, ready to be fried in bacon grease until crisp and golden on the outside. The inside stayed soft and creamy, making it a meal that worked hot or cold, plain or with a drizzle of syrup. It was food that didn't spoil fast, didn't cost much, and didn't need anything fancy to taste right. Even when cupboards were bare, there was always cornmeal to rely on. Its smell filled the kitchen like a promise, warm and earthy, steady as the sunrise. Every bite carried the comfort of routine and the pride of making something from almost nothing. In the mountains, that was enough to keep spirits strong. Vegetable jelly. O-Salad was the cafeteria's attempt to make vegetables exciting, a shimmering lime green mold studded with shredded carrots or bits of cabbage that wobbled on every tray. At first glance, it looked like dessert, catching the light in a jewel-toned sparkle that promised sweetness. One bite revealed the curious mix of tangy gelatin and crisp vegetables, a flavor both strange and oddly refreshing. Teachers encouraged second helpings, claiming it was healthy, while students debated whether it belonged with the main course or beside the pudding. Some children loved the crunch of carrot against the sweet lime, while others quietly pushed it aside, mesmerized by its wobble. The memory of that cool, jiggling slice is unforgettable, a relic of a time when creativity ruled the cafeteria and no combination seemed too bold to try. Vegetable Jell-O salad remains one of the most distinctive and talked about curiosities of 1960s school lunches. Egg salad with sweet pickle relish was the batch-made lunch that carried families through hot summers, last-minute picnics, and quick work breaks. You boiled up some eggs, peeled them, chopped them, mixed in mayo, sweet pickle relish, a little salt and pepper, and scooped the whole thing onto soft sandwich bread or rolls. It was creamy, tangy, and came together fast, especially if the eggs were boiled ahead of time. Old cookbooks loved this one because it was practical, frugal, and ready in under 10 minutes if you planned right. It filled up hungry bellies when grocery money was tight, and kids happily took it to school tucked in wax paper wraps. Some folks dressed it up with celery or paprika, but the sweet pickle relish was the real shortcut, adding just enough kick to brighten up plain eggs and mayo. You would find this recipe in faded lunchbox guides, community cookbooks, or scribbled on note cards in kitchen drawers. It might not win awards today, but back then, it was one of those quick, comforting lunches that kept families fed when every dollar counted. Cold-fried chicken thighs were not made for picnics or company. They were working man's food. The chicken was usually fried in lard the night before, seasoned simply with salt and pepper, then packed into tin pails while it was still warm. By the time lunchtime came, the crust had softened, the fat had settled, and the flavor had deepened into something only patience could make. Miners, loggers, and farmhands ate it straight from the bone, with biscuits or cornbread if they were lucky. It was greasy, hearty, and reliable, one of those meals that filled you up without fuss. Fried chicken was too precious to waste, so the thighs and legs went to work while the white meat stayed home for Sunday. Every bite carried the memory of the skillet's sizzle, the smell of home kitchens that kept the mountains fed even when the world forgot them. Goulash Midwest style filled giant steel pans with elbow macaroni, ground beef, and a slow-simmered tomato sauce that could stretch to feed an entire cafeteria. The noodles soaked up the savory juices until every bite delivered both comfort and fullness, making it a reliable favorite when budgets were tight. Lunch ladies stirred vats of the bubbling mixture with long wooden paddles, and the smell of tomatoes and browned beef drifted down school hallways, luring students long before the bell rang. A sprinkle of dried oregano or a dash of black pepper was the only seasoning needed to make it feel like a special treat. Children returned for second helpings, knowing the warmth of that simple dish would carry them through the afternoon's lessons. It was hearty, inexpensive, and endlessly adaptable, a dish that symbolized how school kitchens turned plain staples into memorable meals. Goulash Midwest style remains a shining example of how resourceful cooking and a little spice transformed ordinary ingredients into a lunch many still crave today. Ham and pickle sandwiches were one of those salty, tangy lunches you could whip together before the coffee even finished brewing. You sliced up Spam, fried it in a pan, stacked it on soft white bread, and layered pickles over the top, done in under 10 minutes. It was not the prettiest meal, but it was fast, filling, and made with stuff most families already had sitting in the pantry. Spam was practically a food group during the lean years, and those jars of pickles stretched on forever, making this one of the quickest cheap lunches around. Some folks added mustard, lettuce, or even a slice of cheese if they had it, but most just kept it plain. Back then, nobody cared about gourmet ingredients or trendy recipes. Lunch was about survival, and a hot Spam sandwich hit the spot when the cupboards were running bare. You would find this recipe scribbled on index cards, stuck in old cookbooks, or just passed along by word of mouth. It might sound like an oddball now, but back then, Spam and pickles were a lunchroom classic that got families through tight days. Cabbage and potato stew was a Depression-era lifesaver that filled you up without emptying your wallet. Cabbage was very cheap, and potatoes added the starchy heartiness that needed to make this stew a stick-to-your-ribs kind of meal. You'd chop up the cabbage and potatoes, toss them into a big pot with some water or broth, and let it all simmer until soft and flavorful. If you had a carrot or onion lying around, throw that in too, it wouldn't hurt. This stew surely wasn't the most glamorous meal of all, but it got the job done. Were you fed after it? Yes. So it did what it needed to do. It could feed the whole family while costing almost next to nothing. The best part, you might wonder? That big batch you made yesterday is even better tasting today. In tough times, cabbage and potato stew was the definition of comfort food. It wasn't fancy, but it was nourishing, satisfying, and made the most out of simple ingredients. Plus, cabbage could stretch for days, so this meal often became a household staple when the budget was tight. Cold biscuit sandwiches with molasses or fatback were the kind of lunch that got a man through a 12-hour day with nothing but grit and habit to lean on. The biscuits were always cold by the time the tin lunch pail opened, but that did not matter much. If there was molasses in the pantry, you spread it thick for sweetness. If there was only fatback, you tucked in a slice or two for salt and smoke. The biscuits themselves were usually baked from leftover dough at dawn, made tough enough to hold together through a morning in a jacket pocket. By noon, the edges had gone soft, and the smell of lard or syrup made the whole meal feel like home. These sandwiches were a bridge between the breakfast table and the next hard stretch of fieldwork, something made from what little you had but worth every bite. Each one carried a taste of someone's kitchen, and even in its plainness, it was love in its simplest form, wrapped in wax paper and patience. Quick skillet tamale pie was the shortcut lunch that showed up in nearly every old cookbook under hearty fast meals. You browned some ground beef, poured in canned chili, sprinkled crushed corn chips over the top, and finished it off with shredded cheese. It was fast, filling, and about as close to homemade comfort food as you could get when groceries were scarce and the clock was ticking. Moms loved it because the ingredients were cheap, and kids devoured it because it was spicy, cheesy, and crunchy all at once. Some folks tossed on sour cream or salsa to dress it up, but most families stuck with the basics when money was tight. It was not authentic tamale pie, but nobody cared. It hit the spot, fed the family, and came together in under 10 minutes. You could find this recipe scribbled in old notepads, passed down from neighbors, or tucked into faded cookbooks that promised fast, filling lunches for busy days. Moving away from my favorite soup of all and onto something a little less. I don't want to sound mean, so I am not going to say anything at all. But it's enough to say that I am not a fan of this next one. Vegetable stir-fry with rice. It was a favorite back in the day for its low price and because it was a great way to use up any leftovers. The concept was simple. Grab a few vegetables, carrots, cabbage, onions, or whatever you had, chop them up and toss them in a hot pan with some oil. Stir-fry until everything was crispy and cooked through, and serve it over rice for a filling meal. Rice was the perfect base for any meal because it was inexpensive and went a long way. The vegetables added color, texture, and nutritional value, making it seem like it was a specialty of some sort, without too much cost or effort. If you were lucky enough to have some soy sauce or spices, you could add even more flavor, but even with just salt and pepper, this stir-fry got the job done. It was also one of those dishes that felt a little fancy because it came together so fast and tasted great, even when the pantry was looking sparse. Apple stack cake slices were the mountain answer to store-bought sweets, and they lasted long enough to pack for lunch. Layers of molasses cake were stacked with cooked-down dried apples that had been mashed into a thick jam. You wrapped it tight in wax paper, and by noon the cake had softened and the apple filling had settled deep into every layer. These slices were never fancy, but they were the closest thing to dessert most folks saw during a workday. They carried the taste of fall orchards and wood stoves even when eaten under the summer sun. If you were lucky enough to get one in your pail, it was probably made by a grandmother who measured sweetness by memory, not spoons. The sugar was scarce, the flour stretched thin, but the effort behind it was rich. It was a small comfort after long hours in the field or at the mill, reminding everyone that even in lean times, there was room for something kind and homemade. Creamed chipped ham sandwiches were a Pittsburgh favorite that made their way onto 1960s school menus, bringing savory comfort to cold afternoons. Finely minced ham was simmered in a creamy white sauce until thick and velvety, then spooned over soft hamburger buns that soaked up the rich gravy. The scent of smoky ham and warm milk sauce filled the cafeteria, promising a stick-to-your-ribs meal that could power students through the rest of the day. The mixture's salty-sweet balance made each bite a warm reminder of home cooking, and even those who were unsure at first found themselves scraping every last drop from the tray. Lunch ladies appreciated how easily the recipe could be stretched to feed hundreds while still tasting like a special treat. Creamed chipped ham sandwiches proved that simple ingredients, handled with care, could create a dish that was both practical and memorable, a lunchtime highlight that lingered in the minds of all who tasted it. Potato cakes from leftover mash were the quiet heroes of mountain kitchens. You mixed yesterday's mashed potatoes with flour, salt, and maybe an egg if you had one, then fried them in lard until the edges turned crisp. They were soft inside and golden outside, wrapped in cloth to stay warm for the noontime break. Whether eaten with onions or just plain, they were the kind of food that filled the stomach and felt familiar. They started as supper leftovers but became a comfort in their own right, passed from hand to hand in lunch tins and brown paper. Nothing fancy, just good sense and good flavor. Every family had their way of making them, but they all shared the same goal, stretching a meal into tomorrow. Meatloaf with ketchup glaze stood tall as the definition of classic comfort, sliced into neat rectangles that fit perfectly on the plastic tray compartments. Ground beef was mixed with breadcrumbs, eggs, and onions, then baked until the edges browned. Just before serving, a layer of ketchup was spread on top and caramelized to a sweet, tangy finish that gleamed under the cafeteria lights. The aroma of roasted beef and warm ketchup wafted through the lunchroom, signaling a meal that felt like home even on the busiest school day. Children enjoyed the contrast of the tender interior with the sticky, flavorful glaze, often sneaking bites before sitting down. It was hearty enough to power through long afternoons of lessons and playground games, a dependable dish that never disappointed. Meatloaf with ketchup glaze remains a beloved memory, proof that even the simplest recipes can create lasting comfort when shared with a room full of hungry students eager for something warm and familiar. Hand-cold macaroni ring mold with tuna was the kind of no-cook lunch you either loved or never wanted to see again, but back in the day, it was everywhere. You cooked elbow macaroni ahead of time, chilled it, then mixed in canned tuna, mayo, and peas, pouring the whole thing into a gelatin mold. After a quick trip to the fridge, it came out shaped like a perfect ring, ready for slicing. It sounds a little strange, but in church luncheons, potlucks, and quick summer meals, this was considered fancy and practical. Moms loved it because there was no cooking when the house was already boiling hot, and the ingredients were cheap pantry staples. The gelatin molds made it look like more effort went into lunch than actually did. You sliced off a wedge, maybe threw a little lettuce or parsley on the plate, and that was it. Lunch was ready, cold, filling, and good enough to impress the neighbors. It might not win over modern taste buds, but back then, this molded tuna salad was the fast-track ticket to a retro lunch that felt special when time was short. Sorghum syrup sandwiches were sugar for the poor and fuel for the strong. A thick smear of dark syrup between two biscuits or slices of white bread turned into instant energy for men working fields or hauling timber. Sorghum grew easy in southern soil, and the syrup mills were the heart of many small towns come harvest season. The sandwich itself was sticky and simple, sweetness caught between starch, just messy enough to make it real. It was the kind of food children would sneak before chores, and grown folks would pack for long days when they needed something to push them through. Sorghum was more than a sweetener. It was survival in a jar, and it stayed good for months. The taste was rich, earthy, and honest, a little bitter around the edges, just like life itself. Sweet potato puff turned a basic vegetable into a dessert-like treat that thrilled students who usually avoided anything labeled a vegetable. Whipped sweet potatoes were mixed with a hint of sugar and butter, then topped with a crunchy layer of crushed cornflakes that baked to a golden crisp. The contrast of smooth, sweet filling and the caramelized cereal crust created a bite that was both creamy and crisp. As the pans came out of the oven, the warm scent of roasted sweet potato and toasted cornflakes drifted through the cafeteria, teasing appetites. Children often compared the dish to pie without the crust, and many went back for seconds despite claiming they were full. Teachers appreciated that it was packed with vitamins, while students simply loved its candy-like flavor. Sweet potato puff was a clever way to sneak nutrients into a beloved side dish, proving that school lunches could be both nourishing and delightfully indulgent. Creamed corn and egg skillet was one of those weirdly satisfying lunches that showed up when the fridge was nearly empty and time was running short. You would grab a can of creamed corn, crack in a few eggs, and fry everything together in one pan. It sounds questionable now, but for families back then, it was warm, savory, and fast. Ready in minutes when kids came home hungry or Dad's lunch break was short. It usually got served with plain white toast or leftover biscuits, soaking up every last bit of that creamy, buttery mess. Some folks added black pepper or a sprinkle of shredded cheese, but most kept it plain because that is what was in the cupboard. It was not glamorous, and nobody was putting this on a restaurant menu, but in old cookbooks it was listed right next to the hearty quick meals section. That is how you knew it worked. Ham hock and pinto bean pouches were lunches that filled the belly and lasted through the longest days. A single ham hock simmered with a pot of pintos could feed a family for days, the broth thickening into a smoky stew that needed nothing more. Whatever remained after supper was ladled into wax paper pouches or small jars for the next day's work. By noon, the beans had soaked up every ounce of flavor, turning creamy, hearty, and rich. Workers in sawmills, fields, and mines tore open their packets, scooped the contents out with a biscuit, and called it a meal. Salt from the ham kept it savory, the starch from the beans kept it filling, and the slow simmering made it comforting in a way only patience could create. It was food built to last, simple, nourishing, and deeply honest. No one left hungry, and nothing went to waste. Each bite carried the memory of home kitchens and the hum of pots left simmering on wood stoves. It wasn't elegant, but it was strong food, made for strong hands, feeding strength back into the very people who earned it every single day. Macaroni and tomato casserole was a true budget hero, filling plates and hearts with nothing more than pasta, stewed tomatoes, and a dusting of cheese. Elbow macaroni boiled in giant pots before being folded into a thick tomato sauce seasoned with onions and a touch of pepper. A light sprinkle of grated cheddar melted into a gentle crust during baking, sealing in the comforting aroma. When the lunch bell rang, the scent of tomatoes and cheese floated through hallways, drawing students with its home-style promise. Each bite brought the tender chew of macaroni and the sweet tang of slow-cooked tomatoes, a combination that felt both hearty and familiar. Children returned for seconds, not because it was fancy, but because it was filling and warm on cold days. Macaroni and tomato casserole turned simple ingredients into a meal that carried students through the longest afternoons and remains a beloved memory of uncomplicated cafeteria fare. Hot pimiento cheese sandwiches on white bread were the Southern lunchbox staple that quietly made their way into kitchens across the country. You made up a big batch of pimiento cheese, usually shredded cheddar, mayo, and little diced pimiento peppers, then slapped it between slices of soft sandwich bread. That was lunch, fast and done. If you were lucky, the batch had been chilling in the fridge overnight so the flavors had time to settle. It showed up everywhere, from school cafeterias to Sunday church gatherings, and you did not need fancy ingredients to pull it together. The filling looked bright orange and odd to anyone who had never tried it, but it was creamy, sharp, and surprisingly satisfying. Some folks added extras like sliced pickles or lettuce, but the plain version stuck around because it was quick, cheap, and kept everyone fed when time was tight. Old cookbooks had pages of pimiento cheese variations, but the classic stayed the same: easy, portable, and just filling enough to get you through the day. Cornbread and buttermilk in a jar was one of those hill country meals that told you everything about the people who made it. It was called a liquid lunch, though there was nothing fancy or store-bought about it. Crumbled cornbread went into a glass jar, and then cold buttermilk was poured over it until it soaked every crumb. On hot days, that jar came straight from a springhouse or well bucket, cool enough to wake a man right up. You would shake it, maybe add a pinch of salt, and drink it thick like a meal. It was cheap, simple, and almost impossible to ruin. which is exactly why it became a favorite among farmers, mill hands, and anyone working under the sun. Some swore it was better than anything cooked fresh because it filled your belly without slowing your body down. It might not look like much, but that mixture of tangy milk and gritty bread was the South's version of endurance, comfort disguised as thrift. Spanish rice bake turned simple pantry staples into something unexpectedly satisfying. Rice was simmered with diced tomatoes, mild chili powder, ground beef, and chopped bell peppers before being baked in massive steel pans until the flavors melded together. When the trays were pulled from the oven, the smell of spiced tomatoes and peppers filled the cafeteria, carrying a hint of excitement down the lunch line. A light sprinkle of grated cheese browned on top added just enough richness to make every bite rewarding. Students liked how the rice stayed fluffy, yet soaked up the seasoned tomato sauce, each forkful offering a gentle warmth rather than strong heat. It was hearty enough to keep bellies full through afternoon classes, yet mild enough to please even the pickiest eaters. Spanish rice bake may not have been flashy, but it was dependable and deeply comforting. A dish that turned a cold day into something memorable with nothing more than rice, tomatoes, and a little school lunch magic. Peanut hot dog and cheese roll-ups were the lazy day lunch every kid begged for, and every parent threw together when the cupboards looked bare. You flattened a slice of white bread, laid down a piece of cheese, rolled in a hot dog, and either microwaved it or crisped it up in a pan. It was fast, cheesy, and exactly what you needed when there were hungry mouths and barely any groceries. Some folks sliced them into little bites for parties or potlucks, but most families just ate them whole with a squirt of mustard or ketchup on the side. These roll-ups showed up in almost every old-school cookbook under quick meals or lunches for kids because they made one pack of hot dogs stretch a long way. You could make a whole tray of them in minutes, which is why this quirky little lunch became a go-to when time and money were both running low. It was not fancy, but it filled you up, and that is what counted. Field pea and ham salad was more than a side dish. It was a whole meal dressed in simplicity. Made from boiled field peas mixed with diced ham, onions, and a bright splash of vinegar, it was spooned into glass jars to last the week. The salad was eaten cold, often with cornbread, biscuits, or crackers, and it kept workers full through long afternoons. The vinegar acted like a preservative, keeping it fresh even without ice, perfect for tin pails and field lunches. Each jar told the story of frugality turned to comfort. Field peas grew where little else would, fixing nitrogen in the soil and feeding families at the same time. When mixed with ham scraps or drippings, they became both practical and indulgent in their own quiet way. It was peasant food that carried pride, a dish built from endurance and earth. Families relied on it through planting, harvest, and lean months between. Every spoonful tasted of patience, resilience, and gratitude for what the land gave back. In its humble way, it fed both hunger and hope, proving that survival could still be seasoned with grace. Creamed spinach over rice was the cafeteria's answer to the call for healthier lunches, pairing leafy greens with a mild, creamy sauce poured over fluffy rice. Fresh or frozen spinach was simmered with milk and a touch of butter until velvety, then ladled onto warm rice that absorbed the flavorful mixture. The vibrant green against the white rice made a cheerful sight on plastic trays. Teachers praised it as a powerhouse of vitamins, while children learned to enjoy spinach in a gentle, comforting form. The aroma of warm cream and earthy greens filled the air, and the first bite delivered a subtle sweetness that surprised many students. It was a dish that balanced nourishment with simplicity, offering a welcome break from heavier meals without ever feeling bland. Creamed spinach over rice proved that healthy food could still taste indulgent when treated with care, and remains a quiet favorite in the memories of those who experienced it. Smoked salad and egg sandwiches were spring's first gift after a long winter's wait. When pokeweed shoots pushed through thawed soil, foragers gathered them young before bitterness set in. The leaves were boiled 3 times to wash away poison, then chopped, drained, and fried in bacon grease until dark and rich. Layered with slices of hard-boiled egg between bread, it became a hearty field lunch, fresh, filling, and full of life. The greens gave a wild tang that spoke of earth and rain, while the eggs brought comfort and weight. It was food born from patience and care, a reward for knowing the land well enough to take only what it offered. In the mountains, such meals weren't poor. They were proof that nature always paid back in flavor and grace. Baked custard cups ended many school lunches on a sweet, silky note, a dessert that felt both wholesome and indulgent. Eggs, milk, and sugar were whisked together and poured into small metal cups, then baked gently until set with a delicate golden top. Served chilled or at room temperature, the custard was smooth and lightly sweet, a perfect contrast to savory main dishes. Students relished the creamy texture, savoring each spoonful as the final reward of the meal. The faint scent of vanilla lingered in the air, promising comfort before the return to afternoon lessons. Teachers approved because it provided protein and calcium, while children simply enjoyed a dessert that felt like something from a family kitchen. Baked custard cups remain a symbol of simple pleasures, a reminder of how even modest ingredients can create a treat worth remembering. They brought a touch of elegance to the 1960s cafeteria, closing the meal with quiet satisfaction that still lingers in memory today. Pineapple and cheese salad cups were the weird little lunch that somehow ended up in almost every community cookbook back in the day. You grabbed a can of pineapple rings, scooped cottage cheese right in the center, sprinkled on shredded cheddar, and if you were really fancy, served the whole thing on a lettuce leaf. It looked impressive in those black and white church bulletins, but really, this was all about making canned food stretch into something that passed for lunch. Canned pineapple was cheap, cottage cheese was always chilling in the fridge, and cheddar somehow found its way into everything. It sounds wild now, but people loved the mix. Sweet, salty, creamy, and a little crunchy if you added walnuts or celery. Moms tossed these together for luncheons, potlucks, or the days when cooking felt like too much work. It was fast, weirdly filling, and cost next to nothing. You could find this recipe clipped to refrigerator doors or tucked into those old spiral-bound cookbooks every kitchen drawer seemed to have. It never made the cover of fancy food magazines, but it kept showing up where it mattered, on busy lunch tables when time was short. Potted meat and cracker stackers were the quiet heroes of pantry survival. A small tin of potted meat, salty, smooth, and heavily seasoned, was the kind of staple that didn't spoil and never complained. Paired with plain soda crackers, it became a full meal in minutes, eaten on break room benches or the back of trucks. Some spread it thick like sandwich filling, others scooped it straight from the can. It wasn't fancy, but it filled the belly and steadied the hands for another long day. Factory workers, students, and traveling salesmen all trusted it when fresh food was out of reach. A slice of onion, a dab of mustard, or a splash of hot sauce could turn it almost gourmet. Cheap, convenient, and long-lasting potted meat was a small insurance policy against hunger. It tasted of salt, smoke, and persistence, the flavor of getting by when times were lean. Those little cans represented ingenuity as much as necessity, proving that even the simplest food could stand as a symbol of endurance. Creamed peas on toast turned a simple vegetable into a meal that felt both nourishing and gentle, perfect for a meatless Monday. Bright green peas were simmered in a creamy white sauce until they softened and released their natural sweetness. The mixture was spooned generously over thick slices of toasted bread that soaked up the sauce while staying pleasantly chewy. The contrast of soft peas and crisp toast made each bite satisfying, while the mild flavors comforted even the pickiest eaters. Teachers praised its balance of vegetables and grains, and students discovered that a sprinkle of black pepper elevated it further. The smell of warm cream and sweet peas filled the cafeteria, creating a sense of calm before the chaos of afternoon lessons. It was humble, yes, but it carried the quiet charm of a meal prepared with care. Creamed peas on toast remains a gentle memory of 1960s school lunches, a taste of simple goodness that modern menus rarely match. Peanut butter and lettuce sandwiches were the strange little lunch you would not believe unless you grew up eating them. You grabbed a couple slices of soft sandwich bread, spread peanut butter on both sides, and tucked in crisp iceberg lettuce, because that is what most families had in the fridge. It sounds like a bad joke now, but it was crunchy, creamy, and surprisingly filling. That is why so many old cookbooks recommended it for kids' lunchboxes and quick snacks. Some adventurous folks added raisins or sliced bananas, but most stuck with plain lettuce and peanut butter when time was short and the pantry looked empty. It was quick, weird, and stretched every last bit of food when grocery runs were few and far between. You did not have to love it, but chances are if you were around back then, you definitely remember it. Boiled egg and salt shaker combos were a miner's quick meal when time and daylight were short. At the start of each week, men would boil a dozen eggs, cool them overnight, and carry 2 or 3 in their lunch pails each morning. Alongside went a tiny salt shaker or a twist of salt wrapped in wax paper, ready to sprinkle with one hand. When the whistle blew, they cracked the shell, salted the egg, and ate it standing where they worked. No fork, no napkin, no delay. It was the very picture of practicality, a meal built for endurance, not comfort. Eggs were cheap, clean, and full of energy, which made them a working man's perfect food. Some paired them with coffee or a leftover biscuit, others with nothing at all. Yet even this simple fare carried dignity, the kind that came from effort, not indulgence. Those eggs fueled miners, mill hands, and farmers through heat, dust, and strain. Every bite was a quiet act of persistence, the kind of steady habit that turned hunger into strength. It wasn't fancy, but it worked, and in those long, weary hours underground or in the field, that was more than enough to keep a man going. Oven-fried chicken drumsticks let schools offer crispy chicken without the mess of deep frying, using a clever shake-and-bake method that kept the meat juicy. Seasoned flour or breadcrumbs clung to each drumstick, creating a crunchy coating as the chicken roasted in large convection ovens. The scent of sizzling poultry and toasted breading filled the halls, making stomachs growl long before lunch began. Children loved the satisfying crackle of the crust, followed by tender, flavorful meat beneath. Served with mashed potatoes or buttered rolls, it felt like a Sunday family meal in the middle of the week. Kitchen workers appreciated how the oven method allowed them to prepare hundreds of pieces at once without hot oil, keeping things safer and simpler. Oven-fried chicken drumsticks captured the balance of efficiency and comfort, proving that school lunches could deliver real flavor even on a tight schedule. For many, that golden drumstick remains an unforgettable taste of 1960s cafeteria dining. Canned sardine and onion sandwiches were the bold, briny lunches that never pretended to be fancy, but quietly stuck around in old cookbooks for decades. You opened a can of sardines, layered them onto bread, added thin slices of raw onion, and called it lunch. That was it, done in minutes and packing more flavor than most people could handle. It was a Depression-era staple that kept going because sardines were cheap, lasted forever, and gave a salty, filling meal with almost no prep. Some folks added mustard or lettuce, but most kept it plain and sharp. The onions gave crunch and heat, the sardines brought salt and oil, and together, it was the kind of lunch that stuck with you, whether you liked it or not. Families leaned on meals like this because they filled you up when the fridge was empty and the grocery budget was tight. You could find this recipe tucked into old homemaker guides listed under quick lunches or pantry meals. It was strong, weirdly satisfying, and pure old-school practicality on a plate. Vinegar-cured cucumber slices and salt pork were the mountain version of lunch without cooking. Sliced cucumbers were soaked in vinegar, salt, and sugar until they turned bright, crisp, and bracingly sour. They were eaten cold straight from the jar, often beside small chunks of fried or baked salt pork, whose fat balanced the sharpness perfectly. The two together made a working man's ideal meal. One jar for meat, one for pickles, tucked neatly in the lunch pail. The vinegar bite cut through the heaviness of the pork, leaving a clean taste that made you want another bite. For miners, farmers, and sawmill hands, this pairing was proof that practicality could still have pleasure. Nothing spoiled fast, nothing needed heating, and nothing went to waste. Even on the hottest days, that chill tang and salty chew could keep a man steady through the afternoon. It wasn't fancy fare, but it was clever and satisfying. built from what the land and pantry gave without complaint. In every mouthful was balance, thrift, and the quiet pride of those who knew how to make something complete from almost nothing at all. Koldorf apple salad brought a crisp sweetness to the lunch line, combining diced apples, chopped celery, and chewy raisins in a light mayonnaise dressing that glistened under the cafeteria lights. Each bite offered a refreshing crunch and a gentle mix of fruity and savory flavors, a welcome contrast to heavier main dishes. The bright green of the celery and the deep purple of the raisins made the salad as pretty as it was tasty, while the creamy dressing tied everything together into a single satisfying scoop. Students often poked at the raisins first, saving them like little prizes hidden among the apples. Teachers praised it as a balanced choice that provided fruit and vegetables in one dish, and the cool texture made it perfect for warm days when the kitchen ovens heated the building. Waldorf apple salad might seem simple now, but in the 1960s cafeteria it felt delightfully sophisticated, a touch of elegance on a plastic tray that turned an ordinary school lunch into something just a bit more special. Sweet potato biscuit sandwiches were the kind of lunch that reminded folks that thrift could taste like tenderness. The biscuits were soft and golden, their orange hue a promise of warmth even on the coldest mornings. Made with mashed sweet potatoes, flour, lard, and a touch of sorghum or molasses, they stayed moist long after they cooled. Wrapped in wax paper and carried in lunch pails or cloth sacks, they held together through fields, mills, and rail yards. Some were filled with ham or salt pork, others with apple butter or honey if luck allowed. That balance of sweet and salty made each bite feel like a small comfort earned by honest labor. Sweet potatoes were a farmer's blessing, cheap, nourishing, and long-lasting. They grew in poor soil, stored through winter, and stretched across every meal from breakfast to supper. But in biscuit form, they became something more, a taste of home that could travel anywhere. Even eaten cold, they carried the warmth of the kitchen, the memory of hands that mixed, kneaded, and baked with care. Each bite was nourishment for body and spirit, proof that a little sweetness and hard work could turn humble ingredients into something unforgettable. Baked corn pudding brought a gentle sweetness to the lunch line, a golden casserole where fresh or canned corn mingled with eggs, milk, and a touch of sugar. When the pans emerged from the oven, the top was lightly browned while the inside stayed soft and custardy, a perfect balance of savory and sweet. Children loved the way the kernels popped against the creamy base, offering a satisfying texture with every bite. The smell of warm corn and butter greeted students as they shuffled their trays forward, promising comfort before the first spoonful. Teachers praised it as a vegetable dish, while kids simply enjoyed it as an unexpected treat that felt almost like dessert. It paired well with roasted meats or stood alone as a hearty side that filled empty stomachs without fuss. Baked corn pudding captured the spirit of the 1960s cafeteria. Simple, nourishing, and quietly indulgent, a dish that made an ordinary school day taste like a Sunday dinner. Cabbage and bacon slaw sandwiches were a working man's quick fix straight from the garden and skillet. When cabbage was plentiful and nothing from a hog was wasted, this meal came together with ease. Fresh cabbage was chopped fine, tossed in a pan of hot bacon grease, seasoned with salt, pepper, and sometimes a dash of vinegar or sugar for balance. Once cooled, it was spooned onto bread or leftover biscuits, packed tight for lunch. The mix stayed crisp yet savory, the smoky fat deepening as the hours passed. By noon, it had turned into something richer than it seemed, a sandwich both sharp and soothing. It was cheap, quick, and loaded with flavor, the kind that cut through weariness after long shifts. Every bite carried the proof that good food didn't depend on plenty, only on care. In homes where gardens met smokehouses, this was daily genius, born from habit and hunger. The slaw sandwich stood as a quiet anthem of thrift, the taste of comfort made from what was at hand. Even cold, it satisfied, whispering of early mornings, frying bacon, and the scent of cabbage fresh from the dirt. Turkey tetrazzini squares offered a clever twist on a post-holiday classic, transforming leftover turkey and noodles into neat, sliceable portions. creamy mushroom sauce coated strands of spaghetti and chunks of turkey, all baked until the top formed a delicate golden crust. Once cooled slightly, the pan was cut into perfect squares that held together just long enough to reach a tray. The rich aroma of garlic and cheese drifted through the lunchroom, giving every student hope that today's meal would taste like something from home. Children loved the way each bite combined tender turkey, creamy sauce, and chewy pasta in one satisfying mouthful. It was a dish that made leftovers feel like a celebration, proving that creativity and thrift could produce something special. Turkey tetrazzini squares are a delicious memory of a time when nothing was wasted, and every holiday bird found a second life in the school cafeteria. Vinegar pie slices were a forgotten miracle of thrift, bright, tangy, and sweet all at once. When lemons were scarce and fresh fruit out of reach, mountain cooks made do with vinegar, sugar, and eggs to create something that tasted every bit as fine. The filling baked into a glossy custard with a soft, buttery crust that held its shape even in the summer heat. It needed no refrigeration, no fancy ingredients, just patience and a steady hand. Wrapped in wax paper or newspaper, slices went into lunch pails beside coffee jars and biscuits. The first bite was sharp and surprising, but by the second, the vinegar's sting mellowed into a warm, caramel-like sweetness. It was a pie that aged gracefully, growing richer over time, a small reward for those who worked hard and wasted nothing. It became a staple of mountain kitchens, a quiet symbol of resourceful living. What began as imitation lemon pie turned into something uniquely its own, humble yet elegant in its simplicity. Vinegar pie proved that flavor could come from imagination, not luxury, and that even in lean years, sweetness could still find its way to the table and make life a little softer. Sloppy Joe on buttered bun was the undisputed king of the 1960s cafeteria, a messy mix of sweet tomato sauce and crumbled ground beef piled high on a soft white bun that never stood a chance. The sauce soaked into the bread until it reached that perfect level of soggy where every bite dripped down your fingers and the cafeteria napkins were never strong enough to help. The smell of simmering beef and tangy ketchup filled hallways before the lunch bell even rang, making the line for this sandwich stretch past the milk cooler. Children loved it because it was warm, filling, and just a little rebellious, a meal that made a delightful mess when you were supposed to be neat. Teachers braced themselves for stained shirts and sticky desks, but rarely complained because everyone wanted one too. It was a dish that tasted like pure fun, and its rich sauce still lingers in memory long after the last cafeteria tray was cleared. Pinto bean patties turned humble leftovers into something hearty enough to carry through a day's labor. When supper's beans cooled on the stove, the next morning they would be mashed, mixed with cornmeal or flour, and fried into small cakes. Crisp on the outside, soft inside, they held together just enough to slide between slices of bread for an easy sandwich. Cold or warm, it did not matter. They tasted like thrift and care, proof that nothing in a hillbilly kitchen ever went to waste. You could spice them if you had the means, but even plain, they had a comfort all their own. Some said the flavor deepened overnight, as if the beans remembered the smoke from last night's fire. These patties were food for people who understood how to make plenty out of scraps, and they did it with pride. A jar of pickles on the side turned it into a full meal, simple but whole, just like the folks who made it. Creamed turkey over mashed potatoes brought a taste of holiday leftovers into an ordinary school day. Chunks of tender turkey simmered in a silky white sauce until every piece was coated in rich gravy. Scooped generously over a mound of buttery mashed potatoes, it was the kind of lunch that filled stomachs and soothed spirits in the middle of math class. The aroma of roasting poultry and warm milk gravy floated down the halls, calling every student like a quiet invitation. Even those who claimed they were not hungry somehow found room for seconds when the lunch lady offered. The sauce pooled at the edges of the tray, perfect for sopping up with the soft dinner roll that always came alongside. It felt like a small feast, a comforting reminder of family dinners even on a gray school afternoon. Many still remember that first spoonful melting across potatoes, a warm hug on a chilly day that no modern cafeteria menu can match. Sliced onion and tomato sandwiches with mayonnaise were summer's purest and most honest meal. Made with nothing but garden produce and store bread, they were a celebration of what grew close to home. Thick slices of ripe tomato, still warm from the vine, met rings of sharp onion and a generous swipe of mayonnaise on soft white bread. The result was messy, refreshing, and satisfying in the way only fresh things can be. It was food for the fields, for porches, for shade under trees on sweltering afternoons. No one needed money to make one, only a good harvest and a few minutes' rest. The sandwich dripped juice down your hands, tasting of sunshine, soil, and sweat. Its simplicity was its strength. It reminded people to be grateful for the ordinary, for what could be grown, picked, and shared. In a world where many meals relied on what could be stored or salted, this one was fleeting, tied to the season and the moment. It was both nourishment and nostalgia, the taste of summer itself pressed between two soft slices of bread. Butter and honey sandwiches delivered pure, sticky joy that somehow satisfied federal nutrition guidelines while still feeling like a treat. Thick slices of white bread were spread edge to edge with creamy peanut butter, then drizzled with golden honey that soaked slowly into the crumb. When pressed together, the sandwich oozed sweetness with every bite, leaving fingers gleaming and napkins useless. Paired with a small carton of milk and a crisp apple, it offered both protein and energy for the playground ahead. Children loved the chewy contrast of salty peanut butter and smooth honey, a flavor combination that made even dull afternoons feel a little brighter. Lunchroom chatter often paused for the satisfying pull of honey between bites, a small moment of collective delight. Simple, inexpensive, and universally adored, this sandwich remains a memory of childhood that no packaged snack has ever replaced. Hoe-cake cornbread was humble food with the weight of generations behind it. Mixed from cornmeal, salt, and water, it was poured thin into a skillet or, long ago, onto the flat of a hoe blade held over an open fire. It crisped at the edges and stayed tender in the middle, strong enough to hold beans, greens, or slices of salt pork. Each cake was both meal and utensil, eaten with calloused fingers and quiet gratitude. Hoe-cake cornbread carried the flavor of smoke and history, of families who worked from dawn to dark and gave thanks for even the smallest blessings. It was simple food, but never small in meaning, a recipe that traveled through generations, feeding hearts as much as stomachs. Poke dog and bean casserole proved that a few humble ingredients could feed an entire school with room to spare. Thick baked beans simmered in a sweet brown sauce while sliced hot dogs nestled on top, their edges curling as they browned. The aroma of smoky beans and sizzling franks filled every corner of the cafeteria, making even the quietest students perk up. Served with a slice of buttered bread, it was hearty enough to power through gym class and math lessons alike. Children loved the playful surprise of finding extra pieces of hot dog hidden beneath the beans, a small reward for digging deep. The combination of sweet sauce and salty meat created a flavor that still lingers in memory, a reminder of simple pleasures on a school day. It was thrifty, filling, and impossible to forget, the kind of meal that kept students happy and cafeteria workers proud of stretching every dollar to its fullest. Souse meat or head cheese sandwiches were relics of an age before refrigeration, when nothing went to waste. Pig heads were boiled until tender, the meat stripped from the bone and mixed with vinegar, salt, pepper, and spice. The mixture was then pressed into a loaf and cooled until firm, forming a savory jelly that sliced cleanly. Packed between bread, it became a tangy, meaty sandwich that traveled well and kept for days without spoiling. It was food born of necessity but perfected through care, each loaf representing thrift, labor, and skill. Families made it during butchering season, stretching one hog across weeks of meals. The vinegar kept it safe, the seasoning made it shine, and the flavor told of a people who refused to waste what life gave. To some, it was an acquired taste. To others, it was comfort, rich and familiar. Cold, salty, and satisfying, it was a worker's protein long before canned meats existed. Souse meat carried both history and heart, a living memory of a time when survival and ingenuity shared the same kitchen table. Stuffed green peppers turned ordinary bell peppers into little edible packages of flavor and nourishment. Each hollowed pepper was filled with seasoned rice, ground beef, and tomato sauce before being baked until tender and juicy. As they roasted, the peppers softened while the filling absorbed every bit of the tangy tomato flavor, releasing an aroma that tempted even picky eaters. Lunchroom workers lined the peppers in neat rows on wide baking sheets, creating a colorful sight that brightened the cafeteria. Children discovered the joy of cutting into the pepper and watching the savory filling spill onto their trays. It was a dish that required patience to prepare, yet its popularity made the effort worthwhile for kitchen staff who took pride in every batch. Stuffed green peppers brought a taste of home-style cooking to the school day, proof that even in a bustling cafeteria, care and tradition could shine through. Many remember it as a meal that felt like dinner served at noon. Fried green tomato sandwiches were tart, crisp, and practical, born out of the need to use what the frost might ruin. Unripe tomatoes were sliced, dredged in cornmeal, and fried in bacon grease until golden. Layered between bread, they made a meal that traveled well and tasted like summer's last stand. Field hands loved them for the crunch, while homemakers loved that nothing from the garden went to waste. They were bright and sharp, the kind of food that woke your tongue after hours in the heat. Some folks added onions or a slice of cheese, but most ate them plain, still warm and oily in paper wrapping. It was a clever dish, built from what could not wait for tomorrow, carrying that same stubborn spirit that kept rural families going year after year. Mock pizza squares brought the excitement of pizza day even when budgets were tight, using thick bread dough, a smear of tomato sauce, and a generous layer of government cheese. Baked until the cheese bubbled and browned, these squares were cut into neat rectangles that fit perfectly on cafeteria trays. The scent of oregano and melting cheese drifted through the building, sparking cheers from students who knew a treat was coming. Each bite offered the chewy crust, sweet sauce, and gooey cheese that satisfied cravings without needing a pizzeria. Children often compared their slices, searching for the piece with the most browned edges or extra sauce. Lunch staff appreciated how easily the big pans could feed hundreds while still creating excitement. Mock pizza squares captured the joy of a special lunch, proving that even the simplest version of pizza could brighten a school day and leave a lasting impression of warm cheese and happy chatter. Corn fritters with maple or sorghum drizzle were the kind of lunch that blurred the line between meal and treat. Fresh corn was grated or sliced straight from the cob, mixed with flour, egg, salt, and just enough milk to hold together. Each spoonful dropped into hot grease puffed into golden rounds, crisp on the edges and soft inside. Once fried, they were eaten right from the skillet or wrapped in paper for later, still sweet and fragrant. Coal miners, mill hands, and field workers prized them for their flavor and sturdiness. They kept well, filled the belly, and reminded folks of summer even in the dead of winter. If there was syrup, maple up north, sorghum down south, a drizzle turned them into something close to joy. Some paired them with beans or greens, others just coffee in a tin cup. The smell of frying corn was enough to lift spirits, a melody of popping grease and laughter. In every fritter lived the taste of home, of fields and patience, of hands that turned hunger into invention. It was a meal, a memory, and a small miracle all at once, showing that sweetness could survive even the hardest days. Ham and scalloped potatoes delivered a creamy, savory combination that tasted like a holiday dinner served at midday. Thinly sliced potatoes were layered with diced ham and onions, then covered in a rich milk sauce before baking until bubbly and golden on top. The scent of smoky ham and buttery potatoes spread through the school corridors, drawing students forward with eager anticipation. Each forkful blended tender potatoes and salty ham with just enough sauce to coat every bite. Lunch ladies served generous squares that stayed warm and satisfying, a perfect answer to chilly days. Children savored the way the flavors melded, making it one of the most requested meals on the monthly menu. Ham and scalloped potatoes showed how school kitchens turned simple ingredients into comfort food that could rival any family recipe. leaving a memory of creamy richness that endures in the minds of those who tasted it. Leftover biscuit and gravy cakes were born from a kitchen that refused to waste even a spoonful. When the morning sausage gravy thickened in the skillet and yesterday's biscuits went stale, someone clever mixed them together. The crumbs soaked in the drippings, turning soft and savory before being shaped into patties and fried crisp. What came out was something new, a hearty griddle cake, golden on the outside, creamy within. Eaten hot, they were a breakfast miracle. Eaten cold at noon, they were comfort on the go. Wrapped in wax paper, they stayed tender, tasting of salt, smoke, and satisfaction. A drizzle of sorghum or a spoon of jam could make them sweet, but most folks ate them plain, proud of their frugality. Every bite was a reminder that good food didn't need new ingredients, only imagination. Families who stretched every meal found a small victory in these cakes, proof that thrift could still be delicious. The scent of them frying filled the house with warmth and gratitude, carrying yesterday's effort straight into today's workday hunger. Homemade bologna and chow chow sandwiches were the Hill Country's proud reply to city deli fare. The bologna, ground from pork trimmings and spiced with pepper, garlic, and smoke, was sliced thick and fried until its edges curled and browned. Between two slices of white or cornbread, it met a spoonful of bright chow chow relish, sharp with vinegar, sweet with cabbage, onions, and green tomatoes. The mix was both hearty and lively, turning simple ingredients into a sandwich that tasted far richer than it cost. Mill workers, field hands, and school children carried them alike, wrapped tight in paper for long days ahead. Chow chow was a pantry jewel made each autumn from the vegetables left behind after harvest. Nothing was wasted, and every jar told of careful hands and patient hearts. When that tangy relish met hot bologna, it sparked something cheerful, a reminder that home-cooked food could rival anything fancy or store-bought. The flavor was sharp, smoky, and proud, standing for a way of life that prized making do and making well. It was the taste of resourcefulness, sealed in a jar and shared across generations. Hot turkey sandwich with gravy delivered pure comfort, a hearty open-faced meal served on thick slices of white bread. Tender roasted turkey was layered generously and then drenched in rich brown gravy until the bread soaked up every drop of savory flavor. The aroma of slow-simmered poultry and warm spices filled the air, giving students a taste of a Sunday family dinner right in the middle of the school week. Steam rose from each plate as the sandwiches were ladled and passed down the line, and the gravy's glossy sheen promised a stick-to-your-ribs satisfaction. Children cut through the soft bread with the side of their forks, letting the gravy pool across their trays, while teachers welcomed the quiet that followed as everyone enjoyed each comforting bite. It was filling enough to last through recess and the longest math lessons, a simple but memorable dish that remains vivid in the memories of those who lined up for seconds. Cold fried catfish fillets were Friday's triumph and Saturday's carryover reward. In river towns, families rose early to catch catfish at dawn, cleaning and frying them in cornmeal and lard before the day's heat set in. The best pieces were eaten hot, but a few were saved for later, wrapped in paper and tucked away. By the next day, the fish had firmed up, its flavor richer and smoky from the oil. Cold, it was still perfect, dense, seasoned, and satisfying without a single reheat. Workers packed it in tins, sometimes with sliced onion or a jar of pickles for sharpness. It was food that spoke of place and patience, of hands that knew the rhythm of rivers. No waste, no luxury, just honest nourishment pulled from water and grit. Every bite carried the taste of southern creeks, the scent of frying oil, and the sound of morning reels spinning. It was simplicity, perfected, made by those who trusted skill and hard work over wealth. Cold or hot, fried catfish stayed the same, steady, filling, and rooted in the life it came from. Egg salad on rye brought a protein-packed punch to the lunchroom, combining chopped hard-boiled eggs with mayonnaise and a hint of mustard before piling the creamy mixture onto hearty rye bread. The earthy scent of rye mingled with the richness of the eggs, creating a sandwich that felt substantial and grown up. Children who usually turned away from plain boiled eggs found new appreciation in the velvety filling, its tangy flavor balanced by the bread's subtle spice. The bright yellow of the yolks peeked out from the edges, making each slice look inviting even before the first bite. It paired perfectly with a small carton of milk and a crisp apple, offering both nourishment and flavor without a heavy sauce. Teachers praised it as a model of balanced nutrition, while students enjoyed the way it held together neatly for quick bites between conversations. Egg salad on rye remains a memory of wholesome simplicity, a sandwich that satisfied hunger and offered quiet comfort during a busy school day. Old meatloaf slice sandwiches were Sunday's pride turned Monday's practicality. Once baked, the meatloaf was sliced thick, cooled, and pressed between bread with a smear of ketchup or relish. Cold, it lost none of its comfort. If anything, the flavor deepened overnight. Wrapped in wax paper, it carried the scent of home even at a noisy job site. For families who stretched meals across the week, a single loaf could mean days of sustenance. Every bite was seasoned with thrift, care, and gratitude. Ground beef, breadcrumbs, onions, and egg formed the heart of this dish, but what held it together was intention, feeding many with little. It was the kind of food that reminded you to be content, even in repetition. Monday's sandwich might taste like yesterday's dinner, but it meant stability, the rarest luxury in lean times. Whether eaten cold from a tin or at the edge of a kitchen counter, it brought the same comfort. A reminder that resourcefulness could be as filling as plenty, and that good food didn't need to be new to feel like love. Which cheap lunch from your grandparents' era still lives in your memory? Share your story in the comments, hit like, and subscribe so we can keep honoring the midday meals that fueled America through its toughest chapters.